Okay, so we're live? Yep. Okay. Let me know when the 30 seconds is up. We're good? Yep. Thank you. Welcome everybody to the Friday, October the 20th special council meeting. And I'd like to just call everything to order and acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, and the Sinixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. So there is a late item. There was an error in the council calendar that we approved at our last business meeting, and it would just be great to get that adjusted. And so also wanting to bring that late item just up to item 6. So what I'm looking for is an adoption of the agenda as circulated, including the 2024 council calendar and the moving of it from the late item at 10 up to number 6 on the agenda. All those in favor, if I could have a motion.
I don't have a copy of this late item.
It's right in front of you on your desk, the calendar. There's no RFP with it.
Okay, great. Then I'll need to know what the change is.
So mover, it was moved by Councillor Pinero, it was seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor of the adoption of the agenda as amended? Okay, and that carries. And item 5, we don't have any adoption of minutes from previous meetings, so moving into item 6, so might as well start with the first one that we've moved up, and that is the council. So there was just a couple of errors, and I'll just point out what they were, and that was in July, we circulated a calendar that had the meetings as the 9th and the 23rd. It should have been the 2nd and the 16th. And in November, it was the 12th and the 26th, and it's now the 5th and the 19th, because particularly in November, we didn't have a break between meetings for staff to get anything organized for our December meeting. When it was the 26th, we would have been having back-to-back.
Sorry, so we've moved July and November?
Yeah, so July
Okay.
and November have both just kind of moved up 1 week.
Okay.
Part of this was, in July, was to give both staff and council a little bit more time away from the council table to do other tasks at hand. And just in terms of November, we had booked meetings right 1 week after another by accident, so.
Okay, so July, I've already got a busy week scheduled for July. Are we married to the 16th?
Well, the 16th is a cow, so I don't think that that's a problem for a councillor to be absent for a meeting. So all councillors, attendance is not, mandatory if we have other things that are, that we need to attend to.
Okay. Yeah, otherwise November's fine.
Yeah, so it's not, you're not missing a business meeting, so.
Sure.
But there would be a break if we went to the following week, but whatever works, I'm good.
Yeah. We're just trying to look at spacing that out and just giving, like I say, staff a bit more time. Their schedules are always busy, and also for those counselors that also have children and are trying to plan vacation and such, so.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, do we want to just do the business and then the cow the next week?
Yeah. So I think if you're okay with that, and yeah. And any other concerns that people see there? Otherwise, the calendar is staying exactly as it was as we passed it.
You mean we want to pass?
Well, we want this one, but this is, those are the only changes compared to the ones that we passed. We're just trying to make an adjustment here.
Great.
And then this can go out, and this is the earliest we've ever had the council meeting calendar available. So I think it allows people to plan better, including our staff as well as ourselves.
Do you need a motion for this, to adopt this?
Yes, please.
I move it.
Moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor, and that carries. I'm just going to ask Corporate Officer to come up to explain the next repeal of the, there was an error made, so the next is the City of Nelson Memorial Park Cemetery Amendment. So we passed this at the last business meeting, and after passing it, realized that there was an error. And so we have to repeal the bylaw amendment and start again. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to ask Sarah to explain it to us.
Thank you, Mayor Morrison. So there was an error just in number 7. We cited the wrong bylaw at the end of this bylaw amendment. Excuse me. So the amending bylaw that you have in front of you basically repeals the previous amendment bylaw and also makes the correction. So we're citing the Memorial Park Cemetery Amendment Bylaw number 3582, 2023.
So it was like a typing error, so, but we do have to clean up the house, we have to do this housekeeping, otherwise it's not an official bylaw. So, does anybody have a question for staff? Councillor Page.
Okay, I'm just looking at how, maybe it's just formatting, but just how the breaks under 5 and the bullets are laid out goes down to like 7.5, but then we revert back to 6, 7, and 8. Is that a problem? Do we have things?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
You've got the E, F, the F, G, H, I, and then maybe it's just a indentation. I think it's probably just indentations. Yeah. Okay, I'll move it. I'll move the first.
Okay, moved, and is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Payne. You want to read the first one, please?
Oh, sure. That council read a first and second time only the City of Nelson's Memorial Park Cemetery Amendment Bylaw number 3582, 2023.
Great, thank you. And so that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that carries. And someone want to do the
Move the
second
second.
recommendation? Yep.
That
And
counts.
a seconder, Councillor Payne. Thank you, Councillor Page.
That council read a third time only the City of Nelson Memorial Park Cemetery Amendment Bylaw number 3582, 2023.
Okay.
And just that indentation, we can just fix. You don't have to. It's not gonna.
I'm not clear on what you're referring to.
This part here. At the end. Like, these can just be shifted over and finalized.
If you look at the paper copy, it works out the
Great.
formatting, but
Rendering issue. Fine.
Okay.
Great. Amazing.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that carries. And so, just so council knows, the final reading, because we want to make sure that this is on the books, because we've sort of told everybody it was there, will occur at our next business meeting. So that's why we're bringing it here, so it can be attended to. Actually, it'll be attended to at the COW. We'll have a special meeting at the COW just so that we can get this done as quickly as possible to get it squared away. So thank you for that. So moving on to the main reason why we're all here today. Is item number 8, the Nelson Hydro Budget Review, Accomplishments and Business Plan. So over to Scott Spencer, our Director of Nelson Hydro.
Thank you very much, Mayor Morrison and Council. I appreciate you taking the time today to hear about what Nelson Hydro has been working on in the past year and what we're planning to work on in 2024. It also gives you an opportunity to hear directly from my staff and ask them questions and to get to know them a little bit, because I know there's new council members. So looking forward to being engaged. I will not be speaking as much. I'm going to let my staff talk directly to the items, and then I'll wrap it up. I have, for those of you who were here last year, changed the agenda so that we address the budget and the rates first. I know in the past we've kind of run short of time towards the end, so it felt like getting that right up front discussion going, and then we will fill in the pieces of how that budget and those rates were developed by fleshing out our business plan for 2024. Without further ado, I am going to introduce you to my team. So with me today, I have Nathan, who's our finance. Do you have an official title for Nelson Hydro, or
Financial officer.
financial officer for Nelson Hydro? He'll talk you through the budget and the rates. I don't have anybody here from the EcoSafe, so I'll speak to that, and we'll talk about briefly with that. Gabe Bouvet-Beauclair will speak to the regulatory work that we've been doing this past year. And then my team that works with me directly at Nelson Hydro, Casey Schmidt, who is the Customer Service and Projects Manager, Neil Dermody, our Operations and Line Manager, and Jillian Mackay, who's our support analyst. So they'll be speaking to all the different aspects of the presentation today. And I will now turn it over to Nathan to talk about budget and rates.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, speaking of Scott's team, although it's a really busy time of year, I do really enjoy working with Scott and his team this time of year. It's really exciting, and I learn from them all the time. So we'll jump right into some charts and numbers. The first few charts, though, and graphs, I'll skim over relatively quickly. We've seen them before. There might be some slight changes that I'll call out, but I won't spend too much time on these, but I'll walk you through them. So this first slide here, it's just showing the 2023 budget versus the 2023 year-end projection. So nothing to do with 2024 at this point. You've seen this before when Scott did his presentation with you last time. So again, I won't spend too much time on it. But your revenues, your top line there, so we're forecasting to come in about 99% of budget. Pretty hard to get to that 100% when there's weather involved, but 99% is pretty good, I think, that we did on our budgeting this year for 2023. Power purchases, as you can see on the right-hand side, we're about 4% over what we originally budgeted for power purchases. There's a few different components. Scott spoke to this last time as well. Two major drivers here. We did have a shorter freshet this year than we anticipated. This is something that we just couldn't forecast for at budget season. Neil has a great graphic that he's going to show a bit later to kind of walk you through a little bit more details on that. We also had a weather event in December 2022 that impacted the ratchet pricing that we pay Fortis for power purchases. So the combination of a shorter freshet means we have to buy more power from Fortis this year, and we had to buy it at a slightly higher price than we originally budgeted or forecasted for, and that's the reason why we are a little bit over budget, or forecasting a little bit over budget on our power purchases.
That was all during the freshet?
No, the freshet, or the weather event was in December 2022. Yeah.
Just need to explain that again. So that, that's the demand side.
Yep.
So you pay, based on your highest demand.
Yep.
We have to pay 75% of that for the balance of the year, and
Yep.
1 day, 1 hour, maybe 1 minute sets that demand for the year. And
Yep.
that happened in December, clearly after council had passed the 2022 budget. And this year, I don't know, I assume you'll be speaking to it, we are asking for a deferral account so that we can, when those things happen, we can put that overage in a deferral account and recover it in future years.
Yep, understood.
And then moving on to the next line item, operating expenses, we came in, we're projecting to come in about 1% over budget. One of the drivers there, the unforeseen costs, were our regulatory costs, were higher than we expected them to be in 2023. And then finally, the bottom line, the capital expenditures. We are coming in at, or forecast to come in at about 84% of budget. It is typical that we come in under budget for capital, so that's not abnormal. The main driver for this one is really a timing difference for the Mill Street project. A lot of the work on that project will be done very, very late 2023 and very, very early 2024. So So it's hard to get the exact number on when these expenses will incur. And so what we're seeing is that there's going to be a little bit more expenses occur in 2024, January, February, versus what we expected to occur in November, December for Mill Street. Moving on to the next slide. Again, this slide should be familiar to you from the presentation that Scott did a few weeks ago. Now, this is comparing 2023 year-end forecast with 2024 budget. So again, we're not yet comparing 23 budget with 24 budget. That'll come in a few slides. We're just comparing forecast with budget. And so power purchases, we're budgeting about 3% increase over what we actually are forecasting in 2023. Large driver of this is Fortis BC rate increase that we'll talk about a little bit later. Our operating expenses, about a 1% increase over what we're projecting to spend in 2023. And capital expenditures about 93% of what we're expecting to spend in 2023. Now, capital expenditures, as you're probably familiar, they fluctuate from year to year. They're not consistent operational costs. It just depends on which projects we have on the go. The pie chart on the right, again, I'm not going to really go over this too much, but just one item of note, something you're familiar with again already, power purchases make up half or a little bit more than half of our total O&M expenses for the year. So that's a significant factor of our costs. Now kind of jumping into 2024 a little bit. So this is a preliminary capital budget. So our capital budget that we're going to be asking for in 2024 is $4.7 million. On the right-hand side, the pie chart just kind of shows the distribution of that $4.7 million. Mill Street being the large majority, the biggest pie. It's still a minority, but 44% of that $4.7 million. Now, Casey later on in the presentation will go into detail of what these projects entail and why they're needed. So I won't go into detail on that, but just wanted to note that Mill Street is the biggest component of that for this year. Okay, so in regards to operating budget, so there's a few things here. I just wanted to highlight a few key points that we considered for the operating budget in 2024. So we'll kind of go through each of these points, and then we'll get back to a few graphics kind of indicating the difference between 23 and 24 budget. So as always, there's a continued focus on safety and reliability. Both Neil and Casey will talk about their programs, their safety programs, training programs a little bit later on in this presentation. I just want to highlight that that was definitely taken into consideration in this budget. Second part is a key to our O&M budget, Fortis rate increase. So when Scott was here last, several weeks ago presenting, Fortis had given us a rate increase that they're going to go with, which was 4.83 at the time. That has since, over the last week or so, we found out that that has now increased to 6.74%. And that difference was based on a BCUC decision that went in Fortis's favor, which increased it 1.94%. And so 6.74, we had to go back to our model and punch in 6.74%.
What was the decision?
Maybe Scott could talk.
Yeah,
to
Gabe will actually be speaking to that, but
Okay,
it's the
perfect.
generic cost of capital proceeding that I spoke to at the budget preview, but Gabe will speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So yeah, the impact of that was 1.92%, sorry, and so 6.74% is the rate increase from Fortis for this year.
Great.
So as a result, well, we were working on this already, but one of the next line items on the adjusted power purchase forecast model, given that Fortis rate increase went up to 6.74%, we needed to find a way to minimize the rate impact on ratepayers. So what we did is we did adjust our power purchase forecast model. And so what we did, and Kevin alluded to this earlier, because it was a two-pronged piece that we wanted to execute. So our forecast model took a worst case scenario approach when we were looking at power purchases.
Yeah.
We basically took the worst case scenario and budgeted for that. And this worked perfect pre-COSA model. but we felt that by using an average approach, so taking a look at the average over the last 4 years versus a worst case scenario approach, paired with the deferral account that Kevin was referring to mitigate the risk to the city. By pairing those together, we're able to bring the rates for consumers down. So that's one thing that we worked hard on over the last couple of weeks to bring the rates down. The other consideration in this budget was a 4.2% wage increase for IBEW staff. So that was the average rate increase for 2024. And then inflationary increase of 5.62% for recurring expenses. So I just want to spend a moment on that because that's a number that's talked about often. We got a lot of questions on that through our IRs last year. I want to emphasize how that only impacts, we did some math here, 8% of our budget is impacted by that rate, that inflation rate, so it's minimal. The remaining 92% is either input manually, so it has no effect on what that general interest rate is, and it's based on contracts that are in place, it's based on work plans that are in place, other estimates, trending data, and that type of thing. So the impact on that general inflationary value is very, very low. In fact, I ran a scenario where we put that to zero, a 0% inflationary increase, just to see what the model would suggest. It has less than half of 1% impact on that $16 million budget. So not half a percent on a rate, but 0.5% on the entire budget. So it's negligible. So moving on to budget comparison between 2023 and 2024. I'm just going to walk you through this chart a little bit here. So on the left side is your O&M, so your operation and maintenance expenses. Your middle is capital, and then your total budget on the right. The blue bar, so the bar in the middle is your 2023 budget, which I'll be comparing with your 2024 budget, which is that gray bar on the right. The yellow bar, so the bar on the left is just your 2023 projections. I'm not going to really talk about that, but it just provides a little bit of context. So also I should mention that these charts exclude debt and water license, and I just wanted to keep consistent with this chart that we did last year, which is what they did. So what we're asking for is a 5.7% increase in our O&M costs on our 2024 budget versus our 2023 budget. So that's that section on the left. I'll get into the details of what comprises that on the next slide. So just hold your questions in regards to that for a moment. On your capital side, which is that middle component there, we're actually asking to expend a little bit less, so 4.7 million on the 2024 budget compared to 6.1 million budgeted for in 2023. And then that brings the total budget to just under 20 million, 19.8 million versus our budget last year, which is just over 20 million, 20.3 million. Now, going back to that O&M piece, what comprises that 5.7% increase over last year's 2023 budget, O&M budget? These are your cost drivers here. So as you can see, the bar on the left is by far the largest. Those are your power purchases. So that has a significant impact on our O&M costs. And as you can see there, $592,000 is the impact of that FortisBC rate increase. So last year we budgeted $7.7 million for power purchases. This year we're budgeting $8.2 or $8.3 million for power purchases. And again, that's directly related to the FortisBC rate increase. When you look at the other components, you'll see some negative numbers in there. That is our effort to decrease the impact on rate holders. So I'll kind of walk you through those. So distribution rural, which is the next bar. So we are reducing that 260,000 roughly, and that's our veg management. Neil is going to talk to that a little bit in more detail a little bit later on. but we are decreasing the veg management budget over last year. In regards to operations, so your next couple bars there, we're maintaining basically flat over the previous year. So we reduced some pull, test, and treat, and then we reduced some small tool and equipment expenditures to try to mitigate some of the rate increases as well. Now the next set of bars are electrical administration, so that's not a negative, so that's a $172,000 increase. Yes.
Question.
Sorry.
Sorry, I just want to be clear. So under
Yes.
distribution rural, you're decreasing veg management, and I know we're going to talk about it later,
Yeah.
but in the rural component.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so just
that's
North Shore and South Shore. That's
Perfect,
correct.
thanks.
The city one is in there too, but on the right-hand side of this chart, so I will speak to that in just a moment. But we are,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you. I see.
Yeah,
I should have
yeah.
waited. I got it.
You're just ahead of the game. It's all
Not really.
But yeah, that $260,000 is just talking about the rural side. Yeah. Your electrical admin, so the second from the right, so those two bars there. This is regulatory costs, safety program, and staff training. Those are the largest drivers in that category that we are increasing over 2023. And then finally, like Councillor Payne alluded to, is the veg management for the city. So we are decreasing by $40,000 veg management for the city. That's the main driver of this one.
And Nathan, the electrical administration, even though it's 172,000 over last year's budget, we're over last year's budget on an actual, so the actual increase is actually quite small from what we've been incurring, right?
Absolutely. Yep, that's correct.
And I think the other thing to point out is, there's questions of why rural rates are higher. You can just look at the distribution, the cost of distribution in the two sides of the utility, rural at 1.4 and city at 0.4. It's $1 million more in costs in the rural area on the distribution side, just because there's way more lines and poles out in that rural area than there is within the city.
Great point. Thanks, Kevin. Now we get into the rate increases for 2024 that we're proposing. So the rural rate increase that we're proposing is 6.2%, which equates to about $10 per month for your average residential household. And then for your urban rate, just below that, we're proposing a rate increase of 5.2%, which equates to about $8 a month increase for your average residential household. Going kind of back up to the top right there, the chart, I'm going to go to rural and urban again. So this is a breakdown of the rate increase and how do we get to 6.2% rate increase? These are the components that drive it. So your power purchases, as you can see on the rural chart at the top right, is almost half. So it's 2.9% of that rate increase is solely due to power purchases. 2.1% of that rate increase is capital. O&M accounts for 0.8, and then deferral accounts account for 0.3. So if you add all those up, that's where you get that 6.2% rate increase. For urban,
Maybe just, I might just jump in there because we haven't really talked too much about the deferral accounts.
Okay.
I did speak to that a little bit in the last presentation, and Gabe will be next, or in the next section. But those are the deferral accounts that I spoke of earlier, the participant assistance cost award deferral, the cybersecurity, and then there's a credit deferral account there for cost of living credit. There's a little bit of money left over from the funds that the province provided to electric utilities to distribute to its customers. So there was a bit of money left over from that transfer from the province that we'll be giving back to the ratepayers through that deferral account.
thanks, Scott. Moving to the bottom right-hand corner, same thing applies. Power purchases 2.9%. Capital makes up 1.4% of the urban rate, and then the O&M 0.9% of the urban rate. and there are no deferrals for urban, just for rural. And so the final slide here on the budget. So this is a slide you've seen before. I think it's likely presented every year. This is the capital reserve, and the yellow line indicates the reserve balance over time, and the blue dotted lines or the capital reserve target zone where we want to, the zone where we want to be within. So as you can see, with the 5.2% urban rate increase and the 6.2% rural rate increase, our capital reserve is within that target zone.
Counselor,
go
sorry,
ahead.
Counselor Woodward.
Thank you. I want to apologize for arriving late. I had a family piece. So I'm just wondering about the increase in debt and the relationship between the increasing of debt here and the capital reserves.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about, like, I'm not sure, like, I guess in just my personal life, I want to like try to pay down my debts and not put money in the bank, but not pay down my debt. So can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I can start, and I might draw on Kevin because Kevin always articulates this so well. But yes, we are incurring debt for rural capital, which is something that BCUC would like us to do because it's more cost effective on the rural ratepayer to use debt as opposed to a return on equity. So this does show, you're correct to pick up that in the future years, 25, 26, 27, we will be incurring more debt to maintain that capital reserve balance within that target. So do you want to expand on that, Kevin, in regards to the 50-50?
Right.
Yeah.
So, as council's aware, this is one of the items that we've asked the Utility Commission to reconsider, that we believe that we should, our debt to equity ratio should be our actual debt to equity ratio. We're not a private entity. We can't just go borrow based on our assets or equity. We can only borrow against projects that we're going to build into the future. That's the rules under our borrowing authorities. What we have indicated, though, is that on rural projects, we would go out and borrow more. Obviously, if it's long-term debt, which is what we're anticipating here, there is a alternative approval process. So this is projecting that, we won't have our citizens opposing us to going out and borrowing, but that's been our commitment to the, I think both the rural ratepayers and the Utility Commission, that we would, in good faith, try to increase our the borrowing that we hold for the reasons that Nathan spoke about. And so any new projects, we're looking at funding 100% with debt for any rural projects. And that's what's reflected here. And we're hopeful that, the Utility Commission recognizes that, we are working in good faith to increase that amount of debt. And, they will reflect that in what that debt to equity ratio is. But you're right. The other side of it is, if we borrow more, than the reserves that we need are less as well. Because right now our model for all our utilities is trying to, develop reserves that fund those capital expenditures down the road. That's not the model that the Utility Commission supports. They support that there's a, certain amount of that capital is paid by debt, and a certain amount of that capital is paid by equity.
Supplemental?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Through the chair. So would our capital reserves interest increase as we store that money? would that be enough to pay off the debt financing incurred by this kind of debt? Like, would there be a balance there?
So basically, it will be the return that we're allowed to make on the equity side. That has to be large enough for us to pay that principal. So principal on your debt is not an expense on the rural side. So we have to generate enough cash. That's why we get a return on those, on, the investments in that capital, that return we get to make. Part of that has to pay for that debt service. So yes, the model, when we've looked at that, yes, us getting a return on those assets will generate enough cash that we can service the debt, if that makes sense.
It does. I guess what concerns me is as we all know, the instability out there, the cost of borrowing could go up. Yeah. And I think what worries me is that this balance between capital reserve and debt will be knocked off its kilter, and then we could have a very large amount of debt, but not generating from our capital reserves.
Yeah,
so
that shouldn't. If borrowing costs go up, that is an expenditure that we can recover. So if it's 7%. Debt rate, we will be able to recover the interest component of it. So we're always talking about the principal portion of that, which is obviously fixed with whatever projects you're doing. On the, as Scott will talk about the general cost of capital review that impacted Fortis's rate. As debt costs go up, so does the return that you're allowed to make on your equity as well. So that reflects kind of what you're getting at, is we will be able to earn a larger return on our equity, which should fund, the
cost of debt.
Yeah.
Okay.
One other component to that too, in regards just to address the volatility, that
Yeah.
when we do take out loans through MFA, they are long-term loans, and we usually get a 10-year rate when we're negotiating that. So
Okay.
it isn't like maybe a short-term borrow where it could be quite volatile as well.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Nathan. If anybody else has any
Yeah.
questions, move on to Gabriel Bouwer.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here today to just give a quick update on our regulatory work that we've completed in 2023. Most of these proceedings and applications, I believe Council is familiar with, and I understand the General Manager spoke to them as well at the September presentation. So I will keep this at a high level and just try to go through the areas where there have been some recent developments and just remind Council what each proceeding involves. Just a high level reminder for Council as well. A number of these are applications that Nelson Hydro initiates, in which case usually we're making a request from the Utility Commission, and then we go through a series of what we call IRs, which are information requests, where the Commission staff and interveners have an opportunity to dig into our application and our request and ask questions. Subsequently, we make final arguments. The interveners also have an opportunity to make arguments, and then the Commission issues a decision. So that's typically the process for the type of proceeding that we commence, which is like our rate application, for example. On the other hand, there are also proceedings that are initiated by the Commission themselves. So for example, that would be like the generic cost of capital or the regulatory efficiency initiative, where they're typically seeking participation from all public utilities in some capacity, and they're exploring an issue that they've deemed worthy of exploring. So to start at the top here, the 2023 revenue requirement application, as Council will recall, that was filed approximately a year ago. That sought to approval for a 9.87% rate increase in the rural area. That was implemented on an interim basis January 1st, 2023. We underwent 3 rounds of IRs. We submitted final arguments in August. We are still waiting for a decision. Likewise, the reconsideration and variance of the COSA decision was also submitted in December of 2022. We did a round of IRs, or I believe 2 rounds of IRs, and final arguments were submitted in August as well, and we are still waiting for a final decision. As council is aware, the reconsideration application essentially is asking for 2 things. A variance of the order with regards to the utilities capital structure, which was, there was a deemed debt component which we do not agree with, so we've asked them to reconsider that. And the second issue being the allocation of the utilities generation, which was allocated to common. So depending on the outcome of the reconsideration application, and we should have a decision soon, there may be the ability to adjust our revenue recovery in 2023 and 2024. So we've made the request to preserve the ability to do that depending on the outcome. Shifting over to these next 3 bullet points, the 2024 application, the generic cost of capital, and Fortis's application. They all kind of impact, or I guess I should say the generic cost of capital and the Fortis application impact our application. So I'll just start with the generic cost of capital. That's a 2-stage proceeding that was initiated by the Utility Commission. It started in 2022. Phase 1 came to completion in September of this year. And essentially stage 1 was to explore the allowed return on equity for Fortis BC. So historically, Fortis has been the benchmark utility, meaning that their allowed return is the benchmark for what other utilities are allowed to seek in terms of a return. So the first stage was really just looking at Fortis. There was lots of expert evidence offered into the record from economists that Fortis had, as well as those that the BCUC staff had. Our participation was relatively limited. The outcome of stage 1, which, as I mentioned, concluded in September, was a finding that Fortis's return should be set at 9.65%, which is an increase from what it was previously. So as a result of that decision in September, that's where we've seen a change to Fortis's 2024 application.
Councillor Payne?
I really need to focus in. Okay, so you guys are done. Perfect. Thank you.
So just to conclude on the generic cost of capital piece, stage 2 is set to begin imminently. So there is a filing that is due on November 14th. We anticipate we'll be more involved in stage 2 as the commission is shifting over from having established the Fortis BC allowed return and is now going to be looking at other individual utilities. So in stage 2, they're going to determine whether Fortis BC should remain the benchmark utility because they have not yet made that determination. And then they would also shift over and decide how each other individual utility should have their return and their capital structure decided. I would note also that our capital structure and allowed return was a large part of the COSA proceeding, so there has been a lot of work done on that front. I would say cautiously that based on the finding of Fortis's new return set at 9.65%, we may be in a good position to also ask for an increase to our allowed return, which as a result of the COSA was set as 9.25%, so it's currently lower than what was approved for Fortis.
Councillor Weber has a question.
Thank you. Through the chair. If Fortis is, what happens if Fortis is not given the benchmark? What effect would that have on us? If where would they benchmark it? BC Hydro or some other?
So they're going to be looking for submissions on that as part of what's coming up in mid-November. So I haven't actually seen, my sense is that most submissions will probably agree that Fortis should continue to be the benchmark utility. And that is derived from all the work that went into stage 1. So there's been so much exploration of why Fortis should be allowed a 9.65 return that my sense is that given the abundance of evidence and that they were previously the benchmark, there's a very good chance that they will remain the benchmark utility.
And supplemental? Thank you. If they aren't, what effect would that have on us?
Well, I think what we would see, there would be another benchmark identified, which would probably be either another utility or maybe the commission would come up with just a benchmark rate. But even, a benchmark is just a starting point for a utility like Nelson Hydro. So although the previous benchmark rate was 8.75%, we weren't tied to that, right? We were able to make a case that we deserved a higher return on equity based on certain factors, such as risk factors or capital structure, that type of thing. So it's kind of the starting rate for those discussions.
It's just like, it feels like we keep getting hemmed in by all these rules and regs, and I just think it's important that if these are going to be shifting, that we sort of run tabletop models to see what this would affect or what that would affect. But if you're saying you're pretty confident that they're going to go with this,
well, we'll see. There's going to be a lot of submissions from all the different participants. Again, I think on a very high level, like as I mentioned, I think there's an angle to say that based on the approved rate for Fortis, Nelson Hydro would be in a good position to also request a further increase on the 9.25%.
okay, thank you.
Councillor Page.
I don't want to take us in too much of a rabbit hole or anything.
Don't do it.
Do I have this correct in the sense that the Fortis benchmark rate has been historically there because there's been a preponderance of effort put into establishing it, and that's just an inertia thing, versus is there an underlying principle you're aware of from the work that has established that beyond just we did a bunch of work on this one utility therefore?
I think they're a significant utility in British Columbia. They're well positioned to be the benchmark. I think when you look at the other options in terms of a utility of that size, you're really only left with BC Hydro, which has a relationship with the province as a crown corporation,
right,
whereas Fortis BC is a private sector company.
Fundamentally comes down to that. Okay, thanks.
So just to conclude again, we'll be participating in phase 2 of the generic cost of capital proceeding. Linking that to Fortis BC's 2024 rate increase request, as you heard from Nathan, that request, which was originally filed in August, began as a 4.83% request. However, they had preserved the right to file an evidentiary adjustment following the outcome of stage 1 of the generic cost of capital. So when their return on equity was deemed to be appropriate at 9.65, which was higher than before, they did update their 2024 request. So that's where we get the 6.74% from. And the 6.74 is not just what they would be allowed to recover in 2024. It also includes a portion of 2023 rates. So they're seeking to recover what they're calling a shortfall in 2023 collection, which they're amortizing over 3 years, but the 2024 rate does include the first year of that. So that's where the 6.74% comes from. And then linking that back to our application, the 2024 revenue requirement application, we have adjusted our budget accordingly. As you heard from Nathan, the power purchases are a very significant portion of the utility's budget, and so the Fortis BC increase of 6.74% is a primary driver for our 6.2% rate increase. It is notable that we've managed to come up with a budget that is still under the Fortis BC rate increase. So I think that evidences a lot of great work from the finance team and the general manager, and also reflects some of those engagement efforts that the general manager has done this fall. And so in terms of where we are with our 2024 application and the request for a 6.2% rate increase, we will be filing that on October 31st, so that is a week from Tuesday. The process thus far has been that preliminary engagement with council in September. Subsequently, our general manager presented to within the city at the Nelson Innovation Center, and again to rural ratepayers at the Balfour Community Hall. So that's been the public engagement that then is considered in forming or developing the application, and that is important to the Utility Commission.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. Through the chair. When all of this is moving through BCUC, do they consider when Fortis asks for this raise in rate, do they consider that small utilities like ours are going to be heavily impacted, and then that's going to heavily impact our citizens? is that part of their calculation, or does Fortis just say, look, we need this raise because we have these costs and everyone else has to deal with it? Or is there any kind of relationship between small and large electrical producers?
So the Utility Commission did accept submissions, as part of the generic cost of capital with regards to that point, what the impact of the Fortis BC increase would be. So certainly, we are part of the BC MEU, which is the other municipal utilities, those being in Grand Forks, Penticton, New West, and Summerland. So as a collective, we did make a submission to make sure that the Utility Commission and their staff would understand the impact of what they were doing with regards to the Fortis BC rate.
Because I think what kind of makes me worry here is that as these costs rise with inflation and other climate change and all these different pieces that are causing these cost increases, that, as always, I guess the smaller player gets kind of squeezed here, and we can only ask so much from our citizens, and council's responsible for that relationship between the city and the citizens in many ways. So I just feel like there has to be a limit to what can be increased. It can't just be like forever. I mean, I guess it can be forever increasing, but it just worries me that we're going to run out of wiggle room, essentially.
Yeah, and I guess I would note, the 2024 rate increase from Fortis has not yet been approved. Like us, they've requested interim approval for January 1st, 2024, but they don't have a final approval yet. So the commission will be looking at the rate, and I'm sure they'll be scrutinizing the increase from the 4.83 to the 6.74 to make sure that all the calculations are correct. But again, they've kind of given them the green light to do that based on the GCOC.
And we also have the opportunity to input as interveners. The BC Municipal Electric Utilities are participating in that proceeding, and there's a workshop next week to, for the first round of discussion on that.
Thank you.
Can I just add, the Utility Commission's role is to ensure rates are at a level that makes the utility sustainable long-term. That's their primary responsibility.
But whose utility?
Any utility.
Any utility.
Any regulated utility. That's their primary responsibility, is make sure it has enough revenues to cover its costs and invest in its capital. Because if it started, looking at, whether those rates were too high for ratepayers, then you start to, that's really not the job of a utility commission. That's, they need to make sure that that utility can keep the power on in this case. And, that's unfortunately what's happened elsewhere, especially, local governments are certainly guilty of that in the past, where they didn't invest in their capital or their reserves. And, I think former Mayor Dooley sent something from Prince Rupert where their whole water utility failed.
Yeah.
And, that's, the Utility Commission has a response to make sure that doesn't happen with regulated utilities, and local governments have a responsibility, hopefully, to make sure that doesn't happen with the utilities that we run ourselves. And you saw the impact. If it's really easy to underfund, our whole reliability piece, largely all driven both by ourselves. We weren't doing the veg management that we should have been, and Fortis wasn't doing the veg management they should have been. It's really easy to try to keep rates low and not do those things, and there's impact of that. And our responsibility, both within our own utility, is to really look at our expenditures and make sure that they're valid, and we're managing those the best way we can. And certainly when we go to the Utility Commission and are an intervener there, then we challenge the expenditures and the costs. But at the end of the day, it's in everyone's interest that these utilities, these essential services that we provide, are sustainable. And you don't put off rate increases and someday it comes to roost that now what could have been a reasonable expenditure now becomes a catastrophic expenditure. And, the disappointing thing for me when I look at a Prince Rupert case is, clearly that they weren't investing in their utility, and who bails them out? Us as taxpayers, which, isn't fair that the citizens of Nelson now are paying for a large infrastructure upgrade in Prince Rupert because they didn't maintain their utility.
Okay, thank you.
And just to get back to the 2024 application and to kind of wrap that piece up, so we will be submitting our application a week from Tuesday. We're feeling like we're in pretty good shape. It's really coming together like it has in previous years. It's I just wanted to note it's really a team effort when we come up with those applications. So each person that's presenting here today has a role in that in terms of collecting the information and getting it over to Scott and myself so that we can plug it into our application, because those applications are an opportunity for the utility to show the Utility Commission improvements in reliability, how much we're spending on vegetation management, what type of engagement we've done with the ratepayers, what other type of customer service programs are we offering. So the application really is kind of a 360 review of the utility, and I'd encourage any member of council or the public that wants to review that to do so, because it is a nice document that ends up being about between 20 and 30 pages. So it's not I think it's a lot kind of clearer to go through than, for example, our IRs, which tend to be going into the nitty gritty. And the last comment I'd make too about the 2024 application is that we are making the appropriate request to do as Fortis did, to file an evidentiary update later in the year, if warranted, to do so by any outcomes of the second phase of the generic cost of capital, as well as from other applications that we currently have pending, like the reconsideration application. And finally, I would just note that this application maybe strikes like each year, I think our applications approve as we become a bit more sophisticated. And this year we are requesting approval for a number of deferral accounts. In particular, the one I would highlight for council is what we're calling a flow-through deferral account, which mimics what Fortis does to allow the utility to achieve some type of recovery mechanism for uncontrollable costs. So those would be things like power purchases, where the utility budgets for a certain amount of power purchases, as Nathan was talking about, but we don't have the ability to control that. So if we get approval for this type of deferral account and we go over on that budget, we would be able to recover that through rates in the following year. So it allows us to record those costs. Moving away from the 2024 application, I would just point out to council that we are also participating in the Regulatory Efficiency Initiative. This, again, is a proceeding that was started by the Utility Commission. It's an opportunity for public utilities and interveners to provide some input to the Commission as to how they might achieve more efficiency in their regulatory applications. So this provided a really nice forum for Nelson Hydro and other utilities to provide some feedback to the Utility Commission about how their processes have been going. And so we had a lot to say there, just given the type of scrutiny that we've been under for the past few years. And it was really encouraging to see some of the commentary from Fortis BC and BC Hydro, as well as other municipalities like Richmond, for example, that had a lot of comments that were creative and also in line with what we would be advocating for as well. And the last bullet point here on this slide is the cybersecurity framework. So as you can imagine, as the world continues to change, cybersecurity is front of mind on many different levels, and certainly it is for public utilities as well. So the Commission has implemented this 2-year pilot framework that requires us to implement certain mechanisms to ensure that we're taking cybersecurity seriously. So we have a couple of reports to file, and there's also a cost to that, which has been included in the 2023 and 2024 budgets. If there's no more questions on this slide, I'll just jump to my next slide. I only have 2 slides, so I'm almost done here.
I'll ask my question while you're on this page, or previous page. In regards to deferral accounts, will there be an account or within the flow-through account protection? It's bothersome to me, which then takes me to the regulatory efficiency initiative, is the fact that we were on time and on date last year when we submitted our 2023 revenue requirement application of the 9.8% for rural. And because we've been charging that and it hasn't been approved, and now we're going to do the next one, if that comes back and they say it can't be any more than what we charged our own urban residents, which was, somebody remind me?
4% last year.
4%.
This year,
So
22,
that's, a 5.8% difference. That, would a deferral account protect us against that money then that we have to then give back to the rural participants of the utility?
Yes, so as part of the 2023 application, we did include requests for that type of account that would allow us to avoid having to do a refund in the event that the Utility Commission approves a final permanent rate that is less than the interim rate that was that went into effect on January 1st. Refunds we've had to issue in years past, and we
yes.
have experienced that with our software and our billing, it is a costly endeavor that is it's not favorable for the ratepayers either. So the design of the deferral account that we requested as part of the 2023 application, if as it turns out that we over collected, that would be used to smooth out a future rate increase rather than issuing a refund immediately upon finding out of that decision.
Okay, thanks for that. I think it's important one of the reasons that we're recording today's workshop is it's part of our public engagement so that, members of the city and our participants in the rural areas can look back and see what the discussions were regarding rate applications, which is really, it's all, I find always this one of the most interesting presentations we do during budget, with getting to hear about generation and transmission and everything else, but at the end of the day, the majority of people just want to know how much it's going to cost them. And so I think that this is another public forum where people can look back and see what our discussions were and where we were going. But thank you for answering that question, because that's one that's in my mind, having sat around the table when we did have to gerrymander the fact that people were getting money back, some people like $2. So it does become a little bit of crazy making. And so BCUC, in my mind, does really need to have this regulatory efficiency initiative and review, and it can't come soon enough.
And I should point out two things. I should have highlighted that, yes, preparing a 2024 application with the amount of uncertainties and increasing complexity that we have as a result of having two pending applications that could potentially have significant impacts on this year. I can't speak to how uncertain and complex it makes the whole process. So again, I think it shows really great work being done by our finance team and our general manager to just try to navigate that. We're hoping we're not going to be in that position in future years. Again, both of the applications that are pending were filed in 2022. And we've met, I think, just about every single deadline that's been presented by the BCUC. So we'd like to think we're not holding the process up. One suggestion I saw from BC Hydro as part of the regulatory efficiency initiative that I really liked is that at the beginning of a proceeding, there would be a date set for an anticipated decision, which might, in the same way that we have timetables for IRs, setting an anticipated decision date might, provide the opportunity to meet that rather than have these linger into the fall. So I wanted to highlight that. The other thing I wanted to highlight too is that there has been a change of leadership at the BCUC, which may result in some changes into how they're approaching regulation of smaller utilities. Again, cautiously optimistic.
And I just want to add, so there's no expectations out there, the cost of service review clearly identified that rural rates aren't tied to urban rates. So it would have to be, there's some discussion around phasing, how, what period of time would, that transition to COSA be phased. Certainly they can disallow certain, expenditures we had. We didn't really see that so much in the 2023 rate application. We prepared this under in my mind, the worst case scenario where we did assume a 50-50 debt to equity ratio, et cetera. So I just don't want to create expectations that somehow they're going back to tying the urban rate to the rural rate. That decision has been made by the Utility Commission that the rural rate has to stand on its own based on the COSA.
Yeah, good point. I think that just to jump off of that, I would say, yes, there's aspects of the COSA decision that we weren't satisfied with and for which we've sought reconsideration, but we shouldn't downplay the fact that the point that Kevin just made was very significant. The Utility Commission recognized that there is no postage stamp rate principle that would apply to the urban rate. It's completely different. It's not regulated. And again, we heard a lot of that from the interveners as to whether there should be a postage stamp rate, but that was never actually in play, and the COSA decision confirmed that, so that was a big win.
If I could also, Mayor Morrison, also just make a comment. During my consultations with the public, I had a very, very engaged presentation and workshop with rural ratepayers in Balfour last week, and one of their concerns is kind of the flip side to what you were presenting, is that if the Utilities Commission rules in Nelson Hydro's favor, then that could potentially result in a rate increase over and above what we are currently proposing right now. I have made no commitments. I said there's too many variables. We can't presuppose what the Commission is going to do at this time, and we will deal with it at that juncture once we know what the Utilities Commission direction is. I do anticipate, based on previous orders and direction with the FortisBC and other utilities, that they will allow Nelson Hydro to propose how to respond to whatever direction that they've given. So if it's a rate increase or a rate decrease, whatever sort of the end result is, we will have to sort of determine that and then make a proposal as to how we can minimize the impact to ratepayers and still make sure that we recover the funds that are directed by the Commission. So I just wanted to make it clear that regardless of whatever happens with these there will be an opportunity for us to be able to take a look at the results and calculate, just like FortisBC just recently did and said, okay, here's what we're proposing. And then it would go to the Commission for approval again. So there's still a whole process around their final decision and the compliance to that would still, result in some more dialogue with, the ratepayers as well as interveners and others involved in the Commission proceedings.
So moving on, this is my second and last slide, and it's just to highlight that while the Utility Commission is by far, the most rigorous in terms of our regulatory processes, and that's where the majority of our regulatory costs are being dedicated to at the moment, there are other regulatory bodies that Nelson Hydro does need to respond to, and we just wanted to highlight that. So Technical Safety BC, is responsible for utility safety within the city. There's a dam safety body as well that requires a dam safety management plan, which is being worked on. Engineers and geoscientists of BC has permit to practice requirements, and of course, as with any other department, we have work safe obligations. So there is money in the budget every year to ensure that we can satisfy these other regulations at a provincial level, and that's no different for 2024. You will hear from Casey and Neil on some of these dam safety and work safe issues as well. And that, I believe, concludes my portion of the presentation, unless there's any other questions on anything.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. And now, Mayor Morrison, I'm going to ask Neil Dermody, my Operations and Lines Manager.
Nice shirt, Neil.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Looking good.
You would get a lot of compliments.
I think we all want to have one of those, so we can all come sporting
talk to Scott.
our hydro uniform when we have hydro meetings.
The shirt.
I love the toque. My favorite thing is my toque.
Well, thank you, Mayor. So yeah, Mayor Morrison and Council, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. We're pretty excited about what we've done this year and also about what we're planning to do next year. So with that, I'll introduce my team. So yeah, we've got 6 power line technicians. We've added 1 power line technician this year, Derek Chambers. He's a great hire. I'll speak to some of the benefits of the 6th position in subsequent slides. Also, we've got 2 electricians and 2 industrial millwrights. They primarily work in the substations and the generating stations. Pretty sure everyone's familiar with who they are. So as far as safety goes, it's been another great year, knock wood. So no lost time accidents or incidents. And that's directly a resultant of the engaged crews that we do have. They're very interested in working safely and providing a great benefit to the city and the rural communities. We've had a dam safety review completed late last year, and it was submitted to Nelson Hydro the beginning of this year for the Bonington Generating Station. There was a number of deficiencies or opportunities identified within the dam safety review, and Scott and his team have worked to put together a dam safety management plan to mitigate and deal with these deficiencies over the next 10 years. The operation crew, so we've been addressing some safety audit deficiencies. So heavy metal, is it heavy metal industry?
Heavy metal hygiene.
Yeah, heavy metal hygiene did an audit about a year ago, and they came out to the generating station, and 2 of the main things that they identified were the lack of machine guards on rotating parts of equipment, as well as there's deficiencies with some of the railings. So we have bought a welding machine for our industrial millwrights, and they've been working on those 2 deficiencies through the last couple of months. The City of Nelson Electrical Safety Committee was established as a result of we're developing, and Nelson Hydro has adopted the electrical safety program policy. So it's not only for Nelson Hydro, it applies to the entire city of Nelson. So we've had it developed with the vendor consultant, and now that we've accepted it, we're going to present it to the City of Nelson Joint Health and Safety Committee in the near future for acceptance. And it provides a framework that is consistent with the CSA standards, and it is a requirement for all utilities and anyone working with electrical. The other big task we've been working on this year is the system safety and lockout. We've redesigned it, identifying that there was opportunities because we had also had more consulting. He's previous safety trainer with Fortis BC. We had him perform an audit on our safety system that's primarily or exclusively for Nelson Hydro on the utility side for high voltage. And he came back, he identified again there were some opportunities. So as a result of that, we've had a look at the Nelson Hydro system safety and lockout. We made some changes. We've engaged the crews. They've also been suggesting over the last couple of years that there might be opportunities where we can improve our safety practices and policies. So we've taken all of that into consideration, indoctrinated that into the revised system safety and lockout. We're almost at a point now where we can initiate it. All we're doing is now we're dealing with the tools we're going to have to use as a result of the changes to the system safety and lockout program. One demonstrable change will be I'm having to buy group lock sets for the generating station that would allow us 2 people individually to go around and isolate points as per WorkSafe policy. Staff training. So we're looking to move our staff training. Previously or historically, it's been documented in an Excel spreadsheet, and the administrators down at our office there have done a great job. There's a lot of moving parts with people coming and going and different regulatory requirements and trades requirements. So we're looking to leverage SafeTap on the mobile app and BizTrainer on computers to assist us in recording training that we've had. And so we'll input the training, and we need to input the frequency at which it occurs, and then we can run reports for the managers, and BizTrainer pretty much automates it, and it will let managers and employees know with a predetermined amount of in advance. So you could say 3 months in advance, the manager and the employees will get an instruction stating that we require such and such training. It allows us to schedule the time of our workforce and take better advantage of training opportunities. So moving forward, solar generation. So the utility scale solar generation keeps ticking along. You can see in the graph there that the generation for 2023 for 3 months is slightly above what was last year. So the line is 2022 and the bars are for 2023. So it just keeps ticking along, doing very well. There is some maintenance required. It's fairly minimal. The one thing we do recognize is there's a timber frame supporting the panels, and it's subjected to weather, obviously, and those timbers are warping to some degree, and we'll have to come up with a resolution as to exactly what we do with them. I think a couple other people alluded to this graph. I do like it. So on the bottom, you can see the dark color. That is the City of Nelson's generating station. Over the course of 6 years, so you can see the peaks are the freshet in the river. So the baseline, and you can see it's fairly flat, that is outside of the freshet. The City of Nelson power plant can generate 9.1 megawatts per hour water license. And if you multiply 9.1 megawatts by the number of hours in a month, that gives you the energy production. So you can see the energy production outside of our water license when we're allowed to go to full nameplate capacity is significantly greater. So we go from 9.1 megawatts typically up to about 15.4 megawatts. And anything above that, you can see we need to import from Fortis, BC. And the implication of this is the furthest peak on the right of the graph. You can see it's fairly sharp, and that is the freshet this year, so it was substantially less in area or volume than some of the previous years, and that's where we have had to import more power from Fortis, BC.
And it was fast.
Yeah, it was very short. It was not something I was expecting.
Bring back 2020.
Yeah, if only we could predict the weather.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. Through the chair. So I guess I'm always curious about all this electrical adoption that's happening in people's lives and generally like in industry and such. I'm not really seeing any kind of, like slow climb, or it seems very even here. Even though people are adopting electrical heat pumps and water heaters and cars and all that kind of stuff is happening. So do you see any shift in this, or do you feel like this will kind of be moving even as people adopt?
So yeah, this is aggregated monthly, but in our power forecast over the years, we do see a slight increase. I would probably defer to Scott to speak to that.
Yeah, we've talked about it. We're seeing that steady increase, and that's part of our load forecast that was spoken to earlier, just trying to, determine what our power purchase is going to be for future years. So we're, constantly looking at that and tweaking that. We did do an electrification survey this past year, which I think Jillian might touch on in her presentation. And Casey has a graph that shows the number of customers sort of over time, as well as power consumption over time.
Okay, thank you.
But to that point, you can see it is kind of variable because I have labeled one peak in here. There was a bit of an anomaly, an atmospheric river late in the summer a couple of years ago, and it was great for us. We were able to produce a little bit more energy, but it's almost impossible to forecast these things with any accuracy.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Thank you.
Okay, vegetation management plan. So we do have a 5-year management plan. We revisit it every year, so we've revisited it this year as well. And as a result of budget pressures, we've reduced the next couple of years' plans. And we were able to do that because our CEA metrics that Jillian will be speaking to later here have increased substantially over the last 6 years. So we're on par or better than the CEA average in a number of metrics and right on par on the fourth. So we believe that our vegetation management over the last couple of years has been very successful. It should allow us to reduce the budget. We're going to keep track of exactly how that reduction in vegetation management does affect our reliability. It won't affect our safety at all. We wouldn't do it if it did. But we feel that there is latitude to reduce the vegetation management budget for a period of time and just to reflect on exactly how that affects reliability.
Councillor Page.
Okay, this will be one of my far right questions.
Oh, no.
Brace yourself.
You could have sent it over to me. I could have asked it for you.
Okay. When we're looking at the vegetation management piece, have we considered alternative planting mechanisms that we might induce into those environments to keep the regrowth down? Like, are there species or brushing that we can be doing that wouldn't necessarily leave that cleared space as an open, bright, sunshined area, but not interfere with the transmission lines? Have we ever looked at a low brush situation?
So within our statutory rights of way, we do have the latitude to do such things, but we choose to cut it all to the ground. It's the best cost, the best benefit for the dollar.
Yeah.
But there are statutories of right-of-ways that extend into private property, and in our vegetation management best practices, we do encourage people to they need to maintain up to their service entrance. And we do have documents that suggest which species they should plant in proximity to their service entrance, so they're low shrubbery and things of that sort, slow growing.
Yeah.
And the other thing is we, in certain instances, we will encourage people to, we ask them to allow us to trim on their property if it is a danger tree.
Yeah.
Or the City of Nelson plant is the target, we call it, and in place of removing that vegetation on their property, we provide up to $250 from a nursery for them to select from a
Set list.
a set list of species which wouldn't interfere to that extent.
Okay.
But what you're suggesting is definitely an opportunity, but I think it'd be a big endeavor.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Councillor Payne.
I know we've spoken of it before, but I just want to, again, recognize the work that's been done in your social media to really explain to people how important the vegetation management is. So I don't know if you've had a better reception in some of the instances when you've had to go out and do some of that tree trimming, of people not being quite as, I don't know, non-responsive or not in favor of it?
We've
Because
definitely noticed that there's a great benefit to the social media and educating the public. Years ago, when I first started, there was some confrontation, and we really needed to kind of turn the temperature down a little bit. But as a result of the media and the social media and educating the public, more times than not, we go out in the field and our vegetation crews and even our line crews, people are coming up and congratulating them and thanking them. And I think we're even seeing in the papers bouquets.
hugs and slugs. Hugs and slugs.
Yes. So definitely that is an effort that's producing some great results.
Yeah, it's great, because I have only been here for 11 years, but I've definitely noticed the reliability.
Yeah, it's
and the
gone.
other thing is, when it goes off, it's like it comes on before, you know, I even knew it was off. It's like, why isn't the internet working? And, you know, 2 minutes later, boom, it's back. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll pass that on to our crews. We've got some great crews.
Yeah, well, they're doing a great job.
Okay, so this is the current 5-year vegetation maintenance plan, and it's broken down quite granularly. We reserve the right within a fiscal year to move those values around, but we put some effort into assigning dollar values to where we feel they need to be. So the first column there you can see is a majority focus area, and one of the things that's new in this 5-year management plan is we're using herbicide application by a licensed vendor in certain applications. So there's a lot of prescriptive requirements around applying herbicide, and we recognize the city of Nelson being a green city, there could be some backlash to that. So we do use social media and a lot of advance notification and public engagement prior to using any of that. And the reason we're using that in certain applications, it's like the last one we did was a right-of-way on a short right-of-way, a couple of spans on the North Shore across the street from Main Jet there. It's just some very quick growing noxious weeds and things. We wanted to use it as kind of a pilot. Rather than returning and having to trim it every year, we applied, it's a very non-toxic herbicide, and we want to monitor the growth, so it should allow us to not return there for a couple of years. Great. So again, it's value for money. So this is the vegetation prescription that's been completed in 2023. The major focus area for 2023 is the South Shore, but and you can see from the previous slide here that we cannot focus in only one area. There's emergent needs that come up, so there's members of the public that'll identify that there's certain areas where the trees are growing into the primary, so there's a safety hazard there. We deal with those very on a almost immediate basis. But this year the South Shore was our major focus. You can see there was a lot of work done in the city, and the reason that occurred was when the fire rating went above 4, we needed to pull our veg management contractors into the city, because the requirement to work outside of the city really reduces their productivity. They need to have a fire watch. They're not allowed to work in a certain hot part of the day. There's a lot of everything. So to maintain the productivity of our vendors, we moved them into the city for a period of 6 or 8 weeks.
I presume the yellow markers here are outstanding requests. We've got green and yellow, a couple of sprinkles of yellow.
Which one are you looking at?
That one?
The yellow is our own crews, so we have the city arborists.
Oh.
So whenever the city
Oh, right.
arborist, it comes up as a different color on when they record it, because they're all recording their work. When they finish a prescription, they record it on the app, and it shows up here for us.
Okay, so green's the contractors.
Yeah, green's contractors, yellow's our own crew. So the Public Works have an arborist crew, and we use them every second week.
Okay.
Thanks for the help. Moving on to the power plant. We've identified there's a wooden ramp going down from the top to the bottom. It's been there for some time, if not the entire life of the plant, so it's fairly old. There's since been galvanized stairs put in, metal stairs put in, so people access the plant up and down on the stairs. But we did identify that there's a significant amount of rot occurring on the ramp. So whereas it's not been used, we did choose to condemn it, and in the next couple of years we'll decide whether or not there's a requirement to remove it or what we need to do with that. As well, every year we do forebay debris removal. This year we've had to do it a few times. We're working more closely with Fortis BC now because one time this summer we had just removed all of the debris from the forebay, and then Fortis did some gate testing at their Coral Inn plant upstream, and the next day it was full of debris again. So we will work more closely with them, and generally it's a great working relationship. And as I said earlier, we are fabricating machine guards and railings to meet WCB requirements. And also this year, we did perform vegetation management, not only on the rock face. Well, we haven't done it on the rock face yet. So if you've been out to the plant on the back near the new unit G5, there's a large rock cut there, and it's covered with like a chain link fence almost. So we've identified that there's the need for some preventative maintenance on it, so we're going to have to get some high scalers in. I was out with them a couple of weeks ago. We flew around a drone. They sent us a pretty cool 3D model of the cut, and we've also identified there's some danger trees on top, so prior to them being allowed to perform any work, we need to remove the danger trees on the precipice of the rock cut. That's going to occur next week. It's not a large number, probably about 20 danger trees. We've also performed some vegetation and herbicide application on its rock cut on the parking lot as you drive down into near the forebay. So on the other side of the generating station, further southeast, I guess.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. Sure. I'm just wondering about the building itself, because I've been here for 6 years, and I've never actually heard about the actual building and how it's doing.
The building is holding up well. I think there's been some work done on the roof some years ago. There probably is a need to do an evaluation and decide whether or not there's any capital infusion required there. That's another job for you, Casey.
I've heard about the different sections and pieces, but I don't think I remember hearing about the actual powerhouse itself.
Yeah, there was the original building, and then it's been added on to twice, right? So.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, what's its FCI score?
That's a great question.
Ask Sam.
Does Sam know?
Yeah, and then lines and substations. So 2023 test and treat has been completed. We tested 660 poles. Of those 660 poles, 103 poles were scheduled for replacement. So we're well into that. And Oh, there it is there. So one of the benefits of having our 6th PLT position is it allows us to participate in the capital pole replacement program. And as part of participating in that construction, it allows us to retain skills in-house. Because typically a utility crew with the city or another utility, a lot of the contractor work is capital construction. And it is a distinct skill set that we want to retain within our crew. So this year we picked 30 poles on
Long Beach Road.
Long Beach Road. I'm getting old. Yeah, and they did a great job. And they were able to pick off poles when other service jobs were kind of growing thin. So it does increase their utilization rate as well. Also this year during the, so still as a result of COVID, there's a supply chain issue. We took advantage of some of our vendors had a lot of poles and transformers on hand, so we took the advantage and ordered a bulk order so that we wouldn't be short. So we've had to stockpile. If you ever get down to our yard, you'll see we've got transformers a lot more than we generally do have. And all of our pole bunks are full, and we're also having our last order of poles coming, and we're going to have to stockpile some of them out on the North Shore. So we've already secured some property. We're having the pole bunks built next week, and then we'll be able to receive an additional, I think it's about 150 poles, eh, Casey?
125, I think.
Yeah, 125.
Can
So
ask-
pardon me?
Sorry, Neil. Can I just ask a question about polls? Just a general, I need it for the next time I play trivia, I think. So, what considers that a pole needs to be replaced?
If I may just go on to the next slide, I can.
Oh, look you're gonna have all of it. Okay, there we go. There's a bad pole.
So every year we do
missed the
two
hybrid
things. So we've divided all of our service area into 8 different regions, and so on an 8-year cycle, we do a test and treat program, and as a result of the test and treat program, we identify poles that are at a state in their life where they're either unsafe or they need to be replaced. So you can see that's a cross-section of a pole that was rejected, and we later cut a section through it. So when the test and treat people come through, what they do is they drill a borehole where the pole goes into the ground. And you can either tell right away whether there's ants, other insects, or rot, such as that. There's a couple of different means they can use, like they can tell what the resistance on the drill is when it goes in, or when they pull it out, and you can tell what kind of chips, whether it's termites or ants or whatever. And also while they're in there, if they find that the pole is sound, they will put these, they call them cobra rods, and what they are is they're kind of a fungicide, herbicide, insecticide type thing, which will prolong the life of the pole until we get back to it 8 years later. So does that answer your question, Mary?
That was question number 1. So I'm just
Okay.
waiting. I'm gonna be told just go to the next slide. So, what do we do with these poles that come down? What's the recycling process for a pole that's now been taken down and replaced? What do we do with that?
So we muster them all in our yard, and they are considered hazardous waste because they are treated poles when they go in, and subsequently through many years of test and treat, they've probably got additional cobra rods and other treatments on them. So we muster them down at the generating, or not the generating station, down at our complex down at 80 Lakeside. And we will get a subsequent number. Well, generally, that's what we do when our hydro crew removes them. But the vendors, like this year it's Maple Leaf Power Corporation, it's within their tender contract to haul them away and dispose of them properly at landfills and whatnot.
Okay, so it would go to a landfill. And so at a landfill, it would get chipped, I take it?
I apologize, I don't really know.
Yeah, no, just like I said, they were just like, kind of more like trivia kind of questions. And then, when we have these poles, coming in, do they have some kind of special shelter built for them so that they don't become weather damaged while they wait to get put into the ground?
No, they've been treated so that they're treated to be in the weather for their entire life.
Okay.
So we do not need to do any of that.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
You're gonna mention the boom?
Sorry?
I was gonna say the boom truck wasn't mentioned.
I'm back on the pole, she distracted me.
So,
What is the life of a pole? I'm just
oh, a
interested.
long time.
Generally, it's
20
at least 30 years.
Wow, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And Neely, the last piece here, Councillor Payne, just I've heard her over speak here, was the hydroelectric boom truck wasn't mentioned.
Oh, I think I had that in here. I might
do.
have
Yeah,
glossed
you
over it.
flipped ahead to answer my
We
question.
skipped to the pole.
Yeah.
So there it is there. The crew's very happy with it. And just to be clear, the hybrid part of it is the boom.
Yes.
And that's good. The PLTs really appreciate it because when they go up in the air, typically on our other units, the truck needs to be running, it's noisy, there's the diesel exhaust. With this one, they can park it, put the outriggers down, and shut the engine off, and then the boom is totally electric. And if they're working aerially for any period of time and the batteries for the boom get low, the truck automatically starts to recharge the batteries. So it's a great addition.
That's great.
Major storm expense, knock wood. As you can see, the last big storm expense was back in 2021. And in 2022, I think we did have a few storms, but significantly fewer than in 2021, obviously. And I think we can equate the lower spend to some of the vegetation management we've been doing. So trees in proximity have been cropped, so when the winds come, they're not falling onto our plant. And we've been very fortunate this year, as you can see. Calls to the outage information line. So in the little table on the right there, you can see over the last 4 years. So 2023, it's substantially less, and the major contributor to that reduction is the move to Voyant Alert. So and also our veg management program and social media. So if we're going to have a power outage or do any veg management, we really get ahead of it. We do sandwich boards, put it on social media, let the customers know. Their major concern is when's the power going to be out and when is it going to be back on, because if I can't cook my meal at home, I can go to the theater or something of that sort. So yeah, the Voyant Alert has really assisted us, because when there is a forced outage, the line crew let the auto, they put an auto message on Voyant Alert that allows people to phone in, and they can hear exactly what the cause of the outage is and when the expected return to service is.
I mean, I know part of it is the weather, but also this extra work, and it's great to see that the hard number there come down so low.
Yeah, it's a great benefit.
Yeah,
You could imagine the fire hall and even our administrators down at the complex, when the storm used to ring, it was ringing off the hook, and not so much anymore.
That's great. Good job.
So 2024 operations in line. So we're making the move to get a more robust asset management framework going. So This aligns with the dam emergency plan. As a result of the dam safety audit, well, actually, prior to the dam safety audit, we had developed the dam emergency plan and operations, maintenance, and surveillance manual for the generating station. That allows us to look at the equipment health of all of our large pieces of equipment out there, look at the equipment history, failure rates, and do a reliability-centered maintenance program on these things. And to enable that, we've bought a computerized maintenance management system. And again, this is kind of like what we talked about earlier about the training. We enter these assets into the computerized maintenance management system. We've hired engineering vendor, they're now BBA out of Alberta, to do an equipment health asset indice on each piece of our equipment. So it more or less assigns a red, yellow, green, blue score to these things. And when things are getting into the yellow and the red, the reliability is not what it should be. And that informs us that we should probably be looking into a capital program to remediate that issue. And also, it allows us to put a preventative maintenance program to these equipment on a certain frequency. And dependent on what we find during that preventative maintenance, you can either reduce the frequency of the preventative maintenance so that you're looking at it at a more frequent rate and just monitor the health a lot more closely. The other thing we want to do in 2024 is the formal rollout of the training for the City of Nelson. So that's the training within Biz Trainer. And also the system safety and lockout program. So as I stated earlier, the big piece of that is going to be initiating it, having the tools available that are additional as a result of the audit and the electrical safety program policy, and just physically training the crews and our contractors on the new way we're going to do it.
Yes, Councilor Brewer.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you. It's when you break it all down like this, it's feels like you guys have a really good handle of what's going on, and it's really great. That's like lots of that looking out in the future, but also being right in the moment and really. I mean, it seems like Nelson Hydro is like that really incredible balancing act of being right in the moment of dealing with all the issues that are coming at you, but also this long-term planning and safety issues. So I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you for that. We do have a great team. I can't take credit for all of this. Everyone back here has helped me immensely, and Scott puts forward a great vision.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
So thank you.
So, Scott, I think we'll take maybe 10 minutes that everybody can stretch their legs, and then we'll come back and have Casey.
Sounds great.
Good.
We'll give him a couple of seconds. He's such a nice guy. He's probably taking all the dirty dishes back to the.
He's got to say hi to everybody.
So we're doing really well with time here. So, we might even finish before 4. You never know. So we are now. Never say that, yeah, because that pretty much guarantees 5 o'clock.
Yeah, that was,
Sorry, I take that back. Can you
Too late,
take
too
that
late.
off the recording?
I love our little progress bar on this one. I hope this becomes our
Nicely done.
mode of practice. We have a good sense of how much we need to get through.
The engineers.
So we're back to Scott, and I think looks like Casey's maybe up next.
Are we good to go?
Sorry.
All right, thanks a lot for the time today. As far as projects and customer service, I'm Casey. Our customer service team remains unchanged for this year. Carissa is our building and collections administrator. Christian is our metering tech. Tim and Bede are both our design technicians. Let's give me a sec to close the door here.
Like the twins, the two brothers. Look at them with their.
Yeah, so Tim and Bede are our two system design technicians dealing with the day-to-day customer requests and more routine requests. And then on capital projects, there's myself. We had a summer student for 4 months this year, and Kevin Donetto is our new power systems engineer, which was a role added in 2023. Added this role to refine our engineering project management practices, develop our processes and procedures to stay in alignment with EGBC permit to practice requirements. We're looking to bring some more of our design work in-house to build up our internal knowledge, and this is already becoming clear in our 2024 budget. Being able to scope some of our projects with very preliminary designs has helped us refine scopes and associated budgets. On the safety front, we had a great year. No lost time injuries or first aids. We also had no environmental incidents. So we're doing good on that front. For customer growth, it's really no change here. We have 130 more customer accounts. Most of those are residential accounts. We did add some information here about energy consumption over the years. The scale is fairly small, so there is some fluctuation there, but there does seem to be a general upward trend. But back to the question of electrification, we haven't noticed any very sharp rises as of yet in data. On the customer service front, we did distribute the cost of living credit on behalf of the provincial government. Dispersed about 1.75 million to 9,800 of our customers. E-billing, this is through our CIS software that was implemented, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago. We have 28% enrollment in our e-billing. Average for utilities is about only 20%, so we are doing quite well on that front. We continue pushing it. It's a lot more effective for the entire administration team if folks pay online. We are looking at a bylaw update beginning this year, and it'll end up in front of council likely early next year in Q1 perhaps.
Got a question from Councillor Payne.
Due to the significant cost savings of e-billing, have we ever thought of offering an incentive to sign up? Have you ever offered an incentive?
Not to my knowledge. I don't believe we've offered any incentives there. I'm not sure it's been discussed or not.
Yeah, it has been discussed. We haven't got there yet. Feedback from other utilities who've moved that way is there's people who are going to do it regardless, and then there's those who are reluctant. Just based on best practices in the industry, they don't seem to make a huge difference. So we're just letting it evolve naturally.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
So Nelson Hydro's bylaws haven't been updated since 2012. So they're due. So there'll be some fairly significant changes coming there. And hand in hand with that will be a service and metering guide, which is more of a technical document to help our customers and their contractors conform to Nelson Hydro's requirements. We're also looking at residential demand monitoring. We do have provisions in a bylaw to charge residential customers for demand, excessive demand. We haven't monitored too closely in the past, but we are seeing quite a rise in 400 amp residential services. So folks that are either building larger houses or have very substantial load for electrification purposes and the likes. So we are starting to take a closer look at demand and whether or not we should be passing some of those costs on to the residential.
Could you, I'm going to beat you to it.
Okay.
Can you just explain that a little bit more in terms of why I would need a 400 amp service in a regular built house. I mean, even if I was, like, I had the car plugged in and I mean, the majority, there's a lot of houses that are all electric now, sort of speak.
Is in her dryers?
And some of it is maybe you don't need it, but in the Canadian Electrical Code, there are calculations that are done based on square footage. There's assumptions made about what appliances and what items you will be using, card chargers. So it's essentially a mathematical formula. It has nothing to do with your actual usage. It's all based on theoretical usage as per the Electrical Code, and that is generally how the services are sized for units. So folks with 400 amp services may not draw more than a portion of that at any given time. However, the code is written in such a way that you need to upsize your service.
Oh,
So then-
Councillor Payne, go right ahead.
My follow-up to that is that, do you feel that there needs to be an upgrade to the code to have a better understanding of the increase in efficiency of those appliances that are coming out?
I don't think that's our place to comment on. There's
Just generally,
I mean,
because-
our data shows that in general, customers that have these larger services aren't drawing vastly larger quantities. There are some who stand out in our data, but some you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a 200 and a 400 amp service just based on consumption rates. So Canadian Electrical Code is obviously a countrywide and very sort of complex topic with many interest groups. So we won't be able to modify that. And just because you have a 400 amp service doesn't mean you need to use more or less energy. It's just how much capacity you can draw from the system.
But you had to pay for a 400 amp service to be installed.
Correct. So there's additional
So
cost
then
to
those
the
prices
builder.
are going to people to take something that they don't necessarily need, and really, we don't want them to take. So it seems like a bit of a
And
interesting
Yeah, so
situation
those
also.
costs are borne by home builders, homeowners. These are costs of those installs. Nelson Hydro does have higher costs because for us to service that property, we have different types of meters. So the costs are higher, but that's something that Nelson Hydro has no
Yep.
influence over.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Page.
If it's in the building code, I think there's an avenue for an advocation piece, but, you know, we don't have direct control.
Right. And it's not building code, it's
Electrical.
Electrical code.
Say, electrical code, yeah.
Fair, thank you. My comment around this, though, is with each one of these 400 amp services is the electrical potential or demand potential of that unit, either now or with a new owner at some point. I can appreciate where that comes from. Have we ever seen best practice or had consideration of how we might cost in what that looks like to have more and more of our system converted over to that larger potential demand, and how we connect that to our overall demand charge potential on those really severe dates? Because the bigger these individual pipes are, the more accepting of increased load over time they will be, which will have a larger impact on how we're planning for capital in the future. And is there an appropriate fee that should be allocated in that case?
Let these folks.
It's complicated, I just.
Yeah, and it is a complicated topic. Even sizing lines, line services could be hundreds of thousands of customers, and even coming off a transformer, we might service 3 or 4 customers off of a single transformer. We have to make assumptions around not everyone's going to use all their power all at once. So what Nelson Hydro decides is a reasonable amount of folks to service off one transformer is something we're discussing internally at some length, partly why we're doing electrification studies and try to better understand where things are going. Because we may have to start putting 2 customers to a transformer, but that's going to require more transformers in the field. It is going to increase our cost as utility, so we need to balance being able to service customers' needs long-term with upfront capital costs. We don't want to overbuild for no benefit. So very, very complex, many factors in play there, but we are trying to balance our capital investment versus system capacity.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, can I just,
Yeah.
just maybe an update, where did we end up? I know when we were doing the COSA, we noticed some residential customers that were using substantial amount of electricity, which looked like they must have had some type of commercial activity, whether it was a welding shop or some other high-use electricity type activity. Where did we end up with those folks? Were we able to resolve all those? Did they get switched to commercial customers, or where did we end up with those folks?
Yeah, so letters were issued to the top, I can't remember the number, but the top residential consumers in our grid, indicating that we'd be we'd be switching them to a demand meter unless they indicated otherwise. We didn't actually get anyone who came back to us and said, "Oh no, I'm just growing flowers or something." That those customers were all converted to demand meters. Yeah. But it was a relatively small number, like under 20.
And we now have a policy of monitoring for excessive usage, and we
I don't
can
know if we
flag
have a
them.
policy, but we're looking at that. That's what Casey's addressing
Okay.
here.
Yeah, we're developing and trying to draw the lines of where we should be looking, and programs like AMI and stuff will help that in the future. But in the meantime, we're looking at best practices and ways to better understand our own system.
Okay. So I just meant from a billing. Does our finance people flag, this one's whatever $5,000 a month bill, and that must be that's not a residential customer.
We are looking at those. We're running those reports more frequently now, and we are looking at for now, we're looking at the outliers, the folks that tend to be at the top of those lists. As far as customer service goes, this is looking at overdue amounts on active accounts this year versus last. In general, 2023, the amount of overdue accounts has been lower than in 2022. So we've actually noticed a decrease this year. There are some anomalies in September, which both have events attached to them. One was a billing error, and one was a single customer who was behind. Those numbers now for October are now back below the 2022 amounts.
And the significance of that, we just wanted to show that I know there's some concern around the rural 9.87% rate increase, especially if people were still being able to pay their bills, and the statistics are telling us now that seems to be people seem to be managing, and I think probably that cost of living credit is maybe part of the reason why, but we're not seeing a big spike in people not being able to pay their electricity bill.
Could you explain, though, why they can't pay it? I mean, obviously, usage is very high, but it seems odd to me that at the beginning of the year, it looks like nobody's paying their bill.
So that tends to be linked to, for delinquent accounts, we'll do disconnects, and during the winter, we don't generally disconnect many customers. So we do tend to notice a spike in the beginning part of the year that tapers off sort of as warmer months come around.
Thank you.
And I think part of that is why we really encourage people to go to equal billing, so they don't get those spikes in those winter months where it's challenging to, maybe for some folks to come up with those large payments in those months.
So as far as customer projects, these are more the day-to-day type activities. We're on track for, in the past 12 months, 440 standard inquiries. So these would be line extensions, new meters, new services for customers. We've handled over 1,000 BC1 call requests, call before you digs. This is a pretty high number. On track with the 2022 numbers, and this is an area we're looking at to automate to try to bring this workload down. The next...
How would you automate?
Using our GIS system, if we map our infrastructure as requests come in for digging in a certain location, if there is an area that is, let's say, within 100 or 200 meters, if we have no infrastructure, it would automatically send a response. If there is infrastructure in that area, it would flag only those ones to be processed and further reviewed.
Okay, sweet.
So we have some larger customer projects going on in town. You guys are probably familiar with all of these. The first 4 here, Nelson Hydro has done the majority of our servicing for these projects. We do need to make connections as the units finish up and individual units come online, but we've extended our system to these customers. There is the new unit on Lakeside Drive, the Kulos development, so that is just getting going. And we're working with the provincial government on the Kootenay Lake Ferry electrification. They're looking to build out their charging infrastructure for the new ferry that will eventually be electrically powered.
Councilor Woodward.
Thank you. Through the chair, can you just talk a little bit about this relationship between, as our population grows here and there's more and more people connected to Nelson Hydro? Obviously, that means that you're getting a user fee or fee for service. But then there's more management, more people, more management of the system. So how does that balance out? I mean, I guess it's a positive that there are more customers, but then you have to handle the load of more customers and more people and more use of service. Could you talk a little bit about that? I guess, is it a good thing? Like, is it that you can handle the growth and?
Yep, I guess from a capital side, as you know, the cost of the system upgrades are generally borne by the customer for the immediate system upgrades, and then they're paying for their energy usage over time, pays for the ongoing maintenance and replacements. So their additional contributions would help pay for our line crews. There's also value built in there to cover the overhead and administrative costs. So I don't see it as a bad thing. And more customers and more usage does make slightly more funds available for all the support.
Okay. So it certainly kind of balances itself out in a way. Because I mean, I guess this is quite a bit of growth. It's quite a few new customers, and just tracking that we're able to handle all that and provide enough electricity and all that kind of stuff.
Yep, and I guess ultimately all costs are calculated in the rate, so higher energy consumption is just more kilowatt hours to spread the costs over. Okay. So whether or not it all balances out, I suppose a chance of a rate increase, but the intent is to try to not increase the rates for the other ratepayers, partly why these folks fund their capital expenses required to get them onto the system.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Pinero.
I just follow up on that. You know, the biggest impact on us and where we see rate pressure is we have fixed generation, which is our low cost generation. As we keep adding customers, it's spreading, that generation is spread over more and more customers. So the benefit per customer gets less and less and less, right? That's the big impact. That's why every new customer we have is really driving power purchases now, right?
Right. There's already
Which
a
is
steady
a
state of generation,
significantly
right? So it's
higher
just
rates than that we
Okay.
generate at. I'm just gonna send Scott a message here on Kootenay Lake Ferry. My belief is, we shouldn't need to use our low cost generation to fund that electric ferry.
Right.
That should be borne by power purchase rates, and obviously with our reconsideration, that's one of the things that we've flagged is that would be served directly by Fortis, and they should pay Fortis rates directly for that, not subsidized by generation. That's going to come from every other customer.
Okay, thank you.
Pretty clear example.
Councilor Pinero.
Yeah, Kevin just sort of stole my thunder there. But I was just noticing in this previous slide that 55% of our expenditures now are purchasing power. And so I'm just wondering if we're at Like if what we produce in the city is a set amount and it's being used now and we're already purchasing power at that rate, then anything that we add to this grid and anything we add to this demand is just more that we have to buy from somewhere else. It's not that we're going to increase our capacity to produce power at all.
Correct. We're fixing the water license. We generally, on an annual basis, produce almost exactly half of the energy consumed, and we only export a handful of days for a couple hours in general during freshet. So we are producing the most we can and consuming all of it in the city out of the Nelson Hydro plant.
So yeah, just something to consider, I guess, going forward with the electrification of everything.
That's why we're in dispute with BC Hydro around the water rights agreement is for that as well.
Right.
As Casey said, we're not really exporting any energy now. We're in the water rights agreement. We're actually providing that to BC Hydro at our cost of generation. Well, not even cost of generation, incremental cost of generation, and buying that very same power back at 10 times the rate.
Right.
Councillor Payne.
So it just takes me back to, my common theme is conservation. That's obviously the dollar we don't spend is the easiest dollar to save. And even with all of the building, this council has moved forward with accelerating the step code beyond that, which is required, and the electrification of buildings. So I don't know what further role do you see that we would have to play to minimize the, I don't know if you would call it the increase of use per capita from what we've seen historically, even as we add to the population? Anything, or should we just think about that one? And if
If you've got any ideas,
comes up-
I'll just put a plug in for the EcoSave program and the Regional Energy Efficiency Program, because, like you said, our cheapest power is that power which we don't use. So, continue to focus on our demand side management through our climate and energy team is definitely going to make a difference in the long run for everyone.
I really like the idea, sorry if I can do a follow-up here, the idea of, you mentioned it, I think, Casey, about having a manual for new homeowners to help them with that process, because there are definite choices that can be made, but not everyone, I don't think, may have the contractor or even with their electrical assessment that gets done, their energy efficiency assessment done, to really know where to go with that. So I think the more we can help people make those great choices, and I have reached out to EcoSave a few times to get direction on that, I think that's also another step in that direction of, just because we're adding another house doesn't mean we're adding another full electrical load to the system. But just some thoughts for the future. We all need to use a little bit less, and it's easily possible without really giving up anything. Put on your sweater. If you're not wearing the sweater and a
Gas.
yeah.
It's not an option for many of our customers.
Yep.
All right, for capital projects ongoing, these would be ones that were either started or rolled into this year. Really only the first two are going to be finished this year, and the rest will roll over. We're replacing the battery banks at the generating station. First set of batteries is online. The second set will be online in November, and that'll be the end of the project. There's a North Shore capacity review, which was a further analysis.
What is that?
Pardon me?
What is replacement? What does that mean generally?
So we have we need to maintain DC power at our generating station in the event that we lose power from Fortis. We need to keep our protection control systems online at all times to be able to control the units. So this is essentially the emergency power for the power plant, and the batteries are all at end of life So we've replaced the charging systems as well as the batteries themselves. The Mill Street substation upgrade, photo of it on the right there is as of about a week ago. So we've started on that on the foundation work in the first half of the substation. We'll have the first half energized in Q1 of 2024, and the second half will be in likely Q3 or early Q4 of next year. So the substation will be fully operational by the end of next year. That is our largest capital project. You've seen it in the budget a couple times, and all of the major equipment is now being purchased for that, so it's all on the way. The G3 and 4 exciter replacements. These are control systems for the generating unit 3 and 4 that had reached end of life. G3 will be replaced in 2023, and G4 will be next year. Our GIS system, the Geographic Information System, is a software initiative. We're going to use it as the backbone of our system information. It'll be the repository of a lot of our technical data. It's essentially a model of Nelson Hydro's distribution system and the assets that we have within it, lines, poles, transformers, and the likes. So it's been going on all year here. We've been building the model, and we're looking to deploy it likely late this year, and we'll start using it next year, and it'll be around for expected decades to come. Design standardization. We are adopting new sets of design standards for our line crew as far as poles and lines for the distribution system only. We're adopting SIME software. This is another software that'll be going, expect to be adopted for many years, and this is a technical analysis tool to be able to better study and plan our distribution system. The SCADA system. So this is a supervisory control system. Our current one is outdated, so we are implementing a new system that will provide us better visibility of our generating station and our, we'll say, critical assets in the distribution transmission system. New capital projects that are getting going in 2024. We have the dam safety projects. This is 10 years worth of projects lined up here on various timeframes, but these are rehabilitating parts of the generating station, including the penstocks, the water intake gates, as well as a lot of the concrete work. So these will be major and multi-year projects. The line up to Mount Nelson, the CBC towers up there, needs to be replaced. So we'll be doing the engineering design for that next year. We have some pressure vessels out at the generating station as part of our governor systems that are at end of life and need to be replaced. 10-year equipment replacement planning. So this is long-range planning that we're looking to do to better allocate our capital in conjunction with the SIME model. These include anything from line reclosers to changing voltages in the Tagum and Squirrel Creek areas to consolidate the number of the amount of equipment that we need to keep in stock by standardizing our voltage levels within the system. And then there's the battery energy storage system, which is been on docket for a little over a year now. This is pending grant funding that we're expecting to hear back on very shortly, hopefully. Supposed to be end of summer, so waiting for the provincial government to issue a notice on that. If the funding is approved, we'll open that project up again and assess next steps.
Is this photo supposed to be indicative of one of these projects?
So that's actually where our GIS system is currently. I guess we have Vernon Street and Weimer Road there, so it's still in the early stages, but those are all the poles and lines within that area.
Got it. Thanks.
So we'll keep building that out. It'll probably take another 2 years to fully implement the system.
That's right. Thanks.
Any questions for Casey?
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you for your
Thank
good
you so
management.
much.
Thanks, Casey.
And I'll introduce Jillian McKay.
Thank you, Mayor Morrison and Council. It's great to see you all again this year. I'm talking about our key performance indicators, as well as some other metrics we track internally and often report to the Utility Commission. Before I start that, I wanted to address a question about electrification that was brought up. I don't have any slides today to share, but I can share with you some high-level information on what we've done. We did a study from about January, February, March-ish to July, and we did a three-prong approach. We approached the ICBC to get some registration data for electric vehicles within Nelson. We approached Fortis BC for their rebate conversions for their heat exchanges and air pumps and things like that to see how many and what kind and who is changing from a wood source to electric source or just upgrading from electric source to electric source. And we also did a survey to survey our customers to see, in both from residential and commercial sides, to see what their plans were. So, and what is their lifestyle, and kind of trying to get that trend kind of analysis from that to see how it was, if it was growing or, and the outcome of that in terms of all three kind of data sets. On the residential side, it showed a moderate growth. And when we compare that with some of our data within our load forecasting tools, it seemed to align nicely with what we had projected for our growth. So that wasn't a concern. But on the commercial side, we didn't get the uptake to our survey that we had hoped. And we didn't get a lot of commercial data from the ICBC or Fortis. So, and it's really on the commercial side of things where the electrification impacts could be potentially felt on the utility side, because that's where you have the bigger trucks and the school buses and all those larger pieces of equipment pulling those heavy loads. And so what we've decided is we're going to be, starting next year, integrating more of a formal survey, a formal customer survey into our kind of annual activities, and we have budgeted for it next year to specifically reach out to our commercial customers and really get a sense for where they're growing, because that is where it could really be tricky for us. Yeah.
Councillor Payne and then Paige.
I apologize, I do a lot of surveys, but I can't remember, did you ask about people intending to install solar or other renewables?
No, we did
Okay.
not in that particular survey. We asked about electric vehicles, we asked about heat pump and other conversions. We asked about other electrification plans, kind of leaving it open. Some people talked about electric lawnmowers, but that's not not so much for a concern for us. Like I said,
I got a leaf blower.
Yeah, but on it's the commercial side of things that really we're focusing on.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Page.
I'm really committed to my diesel-powered vacuum cleaner, so I'm not going to switch anytime soon. Thinking about incentives for a survey such as that is, and I'm picking up on Councillor Payne's earlier comment, are there any built-in incentives that we can consider offering for actually having completed that nominal reduction or discount on your bill, some sort of kickback that makes it worth people's time to do that paperwork? I think as a business owner with no time.
Yeah, we did have a, fairly generous kind of, if you complete the survey and you are one of our customers and, you'll be entered to win a credit. I think it was a $100 credit we offered. But yeah, I think we'd have to look at that more closely for the subsequent years as we engage Utility Pulse for, creating that relationship and getting that data from them, because it is, you're right, people are busy. So why would they want to engage us? And so I think we need to look at that more closely. Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so this next set of slides are our KPIs, or key performance indicators. And this is the set of slides and metrics that we review internally every quarter. So every quarter, I gather the data, I present it in our staff meetings. And every fall and probably November-ish, we look back on our KPIs and our data and our tracking, and we look at kind of where we're going for the subsequent year, and we make those adjustments to the KPIs as we need. So last year when I presented, probably 3/4 of the metrics are the same from last year, but there are a few new ones, and we've dropped off maybe 1 or 2. So there is some adjustments, and that's just because of our changing business landscape. We just keep, and then we have our consultant study we did through our asset management program with Metzco, and they helped us create some key performance indicators specifically for our electricity industry and generation in particular, so we can keep on track of our assets. So we're always trying to increase our maturity on the KPI side. So this year, these are our metrics. So we look at metrics in four kind of zones. We look at financial, so we're comparing performance, actual spend to budget. We look at safety compliance to make sure we're hitting all our marks on the regulative side. And the customers, we want to make sure that we're, all the new connections, our customer connections, our job inquiries, our response time we're keeping on top of that. And this year we looked at capital project progress and a way to quantify some of that work that we're doing. And then operations, we continue to look at the duration and frequency of our reliability and our outages. And then this year we added the generating metric for our generation station. All the data presented here is to the end of September this year. Okay. All right, so this first one is on our new customer connections. So when you're building a house or a new commercial building is being developed, they call Nelson Hydro for electric services. And what we've got here is 3 different phases of the life cycle. We have the estimate phase, which is when the customer calls us for, hey, I got a new house being planned. What do I need to do? And that involves a site visit, electrical design, an estimate or quote delivered to the customer, and that's the one phase in blue. The release is is tracked from the point where the customer pays the estimate or the quote, the bill, and then the package of instructions for our crew has been released. So we want to track what we have control over. So that's what that means. And then on the complete side, which is the black color. The complete is really when the crews have that work package, they go out and do the actual construction and work. And it's mostly our crews doing this work because they're our customers. And so we're trying to manage, that activity with all the, the planned maintenance on our lines. We're managing all the emergent and unplanned power outages. So we're all, we're working that in and trying to make that balance. And so the target is 10 days for all 3 of those different life cycles. And for the up until the end of September, we're performing below target. So that was kudos to our design team and our crews working hard.
Jillian,
Yes.
so these are all cumulative though, right? So on average, whatever, if I look at September, it takes about 3 days to get the estimate done, another day to release, and 6 days to get the work done.
Yeah,
So
that's an average.
Yeah,
it's
so
an average.
in total, that
Yeah.
would have taken 12
12
days or something.
In September, there could have been a high one and a low one, and the average came out, because their jobs are all different sizes, and
Right.
so that's why we take the average.
Yeah, and I assume that's from, you could do the design and my contractor isn't ready for 2 months, so.
Correct.
So it's not that it took 12 days from the estimate to, my service being installed in my house. We're not counting the time that I haven't called for you to come actually install my
We're
pole
not
yet.
tracking the
Yeah.
time that we don't have control over.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if these might be expressed as a bar graph, as a stacked bar graph, and whether that made sense. This target, being that we're under it, and it's great and amazing, but whenever I see a target set well above where we're at, I kind of wonder why we arrive at that target versus maybe something more in line with our.
Yeah. So the kind of the history of the target of 10 days was looking at Fortis, BC, in terms of what they offer for comparable services. So we selected, we looked at their data and we said, well, we're a smaller utility, but so we picked something, their target is 30 days. And so we selected something more right size for us. And the other factor was the crews. What can the crews, if we're connecting our own customers, what is realistic for the crews, given that they are doing other kind of asset maintenance work, they're doing emergency or, unplanned power outage, power goes out, they're doing all that kind of work as well. So we felt 10 days was a decent target. We've talked about internally changing that metric to be slightly lower. We'll have those conversations again in the fall, and we'll see when we change it for next year.
So let me repeat it back to you, just so I'm
Yeah.
kind of clear. Like the 10-day target across the business units is something that individual employees are all striving for within each of these categories.
Yeah.
That's what they kind of hold up, is I got to get this done within 2 weeks
Yeah.
to keep on top. And so therefore, as much as we average it out across the board, we are able to achieve something lower, but
Yeah.
just to kind of expect anyone in a crisis situation or a very busy time of May, I'm assuming whenever everyone asks for everything, we don't want to set an unrealistic expectation to the individuals as they try and chase down those files. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Happy with
It's
it?
always tricky dealing with averages because, if your target is 10 days, there might be some that are taking 9 days and
Of
others
course.
that are taking 1 day. So that's sort of,
Yeah.
kind of some of the factors that fall into
Yeah,
that as well.
I understand. Thanks.
So I just want to be clear. So basically, it's 10 days for each of these services. So a cumulative 30 days from call to completion is the average. Is that what the target is?
Yeah,
make
it's 10
sense?
days for each of these, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
so 30 days from
Yeah.
initial call to completion on average.
That would depend on the customer paying for the service as soon as
Right.
they receive the
Yes.
the design. That's
Of
right.
course. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Whereas, even though Fortis has a 30-day, they have a 30-day for the estimate phase,
Each,
for
yeah.
example.
Yeah, that's what I'm understanding. So
yeah.
Fortis could be up to 3 months, again, providing that the customer pays
Yes.
immediately upon receiving their estimate.
Yeah.
Got it.
So the next slide, this is a new one. When we talk about project progress, there's a very, traditionally you're speaking about verbally, you're giving your update. Oh, we're making this project, we've got these challenges, but this kind of metric, this one quantifies our progress and essentially the value to progress. And so what this really shows us is that given where we are in the year, we're about 3/4 way through the year, but we're only halfway through the chart. So what that means is that there's going to be a lot of capital carryover or rollover to 2024, and Casey did allude to that earlier, and this kind of quantifies that. In regards, so the spend is the yellow line, and the blue is our progress. And so when our progress is slightly lower than our spend, that means that we've pre-purchased materials, but the work hasn't been done yet. And so that little gap is that we haven't quite done the work yet. So we're just tracking our progress against those projects. Okay. On this one, it's a SAIDI and SAFE. SAIDI is our duration of customer interruptions. And this is a reliability stat. It's an industry standard. SAFE is the number of interruptions per customer, or the frequency. The F is the frequency. And so we've tracked this one kind of since the January 2022. And you can see the downward trend as things get, our vegetation management takes effect, and our processes get improved. And I've just highlighted there, some of the reasons why those spikes were there, and they're all mostly due, the April 2022 was a storm where we lost supply from Fortis. November 2022 was a storm, and we had some also trees come down as well on our lines as well. And then August 2023, we had our reclosers turned off. So the restoration time was was probably double more than it would be for something like that.
Frequency was down.
Yeah.
Because those reclosers aren't opening and closing connections? Is that where that's coming from?
Yeah.
Versus
so,
April?
Yeah, the duration would be higher, so it's the blue line, so yeah, so the frequency is lower, so it would be, yeah, we only had maybe a couple, but the one or two that went was really high.
It just stays off
Yeah,
and doesn't
yeah.
spike the other number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So the next one, this is a new one. This is keeps us abreast of how well our generating units are running at the power station. And so I'm just going to walk you through the, so the dark blue means it's available and it's running, so it's producing electricity. The light blue is available, but it's not running, so it's available on standby in case we need it. The yellow is what we have when we take it out for a scheduled maintenance. And the red or the darker red is when there's a problem and the unit stops unexpectedly. Okay, so you can see here that we're performing very high, and Neil had mentioned that if we were running all of our units to 100% all the time, we don't have the water in our license available to do that. And so what we have here is a fully redundant system, and you can see where in G2 and G3 we have more light blue on the chart, which means it's available. And so if we need it to compensate for any of the time where we had an unplanned or a problem in our G4 or G5, we can pick up the slack there. But the darker blue for G2 and G3 is when it's running in freshet. You can see the smaller wedge there, and that's the production during freshet. So freshet is mid-May to mid-July approximately.
Remind me what the forced outage was on G5, our best-in-class enterprise system.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I believe it. Neil, do you have anything?
I'm hiding. I can't recall what
Yeah, it was a minor problem, only like 0.2% of our time.
I don't have the numbers. But I just
exactly.
See
the wedge. Yeah, I can't recall off the top of my head. I did ask Kevin about that when I presented it a few months
visually,
ago.
this wedge is overrepresentative to the actual percentage. Is that fair?
Sorry, talking about the red or the yellow for G5?
The red. I'm assuming the yellow was in response to the red.
Yeah, it's just 100%. So whatever, it doesn't represent hours. This represents like a pie chart. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Follow up.
And Jillian, Neil, the G2 and G3 have not a lot of generating capacity compared to G4 and G5. So
Yeah.
we lost G4 and G5. We'd
Yes.
not be able to produce to our license, I don't believe.
Yeah, that's right. So this demonstrates we have a lot of redundancy at the plant currently, but G4 and G5 are significantly higher capacity than the other two. I've suggested that we can have another metric in here called lost opportunity, which would mean we would not be able to generate to our license, but we've really never gotten to that point yet, which is a good thing.
I'm making a note here, Councillor Payne, to get you that information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
He's Paige, she's Payne.
And
I do that all the time, so.
you started it.
Payne.
It's okay, I started that.
Sorry.
And then when I get really tired on a Tuesday night, I don't know what I turn Council Canaro into, but
She
3
just starts
peas
calling
is
out Jet
way
Sets in
more
there.
peas than I can handle.
Lost.
My apologies.
No worries.
It's okay.
I get
All right.
I'm just glad I'm not the only one that does it. Thank you.
It's my
So this metric tracks our compliance to track spills. So we are required by provincial legislation to track any spill greater than a quantity that is specified in the graphic on the right-hand side of the slide, or less than 10 meters from the water. So we are very diligent in tracking these, and we have 0 spills reported as of September 30th. And this slide is our financial tracking, and we present it this way for the staff, just to get us like a thermometer kind of style, so staff can get a perspective of how we're tracking. And Nathan went into a lot of that in earlier detail, but this is what the staff see. And so this is just a quick overview of that. On the reliability metric side, of course, the SAIDI and SAFE, we have on the left, as Neil mentioned earlier, we track against our index of reliability, or SI, against the CEA national average. And you can see in the blue, as of 2022 and 2023, we are trending higher than the CEA averages, so that's a big win for us. As you can see in previous years, we were lower. But it's also worthy of noting the scale of this graph. If you look to the left, it's 99.65% up to 100. So the scale is very small. When we had to do that so you could see some movement in the line, but so we're doing well overall.
But we all know that people can feel that small amount, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Hours and some case days.
The other good news story is, of course, the chart on the right. The major key message here is the downward trend of both of our lines, and we are at a kind of five-year or more best performance if you look at previous history. So you can see that we're performing really well on the safety side, lower than the best of 2016. So that's a good news story. Then in the next few slides, I'm going to be talking about some outage types. And last year, when I talked about these outage types, I got a lot of questions about what these definitions meant. So I'm just going to touch on a few kind of key areas. When we have adverse environment noted as a cause, an outage cause, it's most likely a fire in our case. In adverse weather, it's most likely a storm or wind or some sort of snow load. Another one is foreign interference. When we have foreign interference listed, it's usually birds, animals, or some sort of motor vehicle crash. That's what that is. When we have human element noted, the most likely cause is some sort of incorrect protection settings configured on our SCADA system controllers on the substations or other parts of our system. And of course, you've all heard about the loss of supply from Fortis, Coffee Creek or Granite. So I think the rest are pretty much self-explanatory given if they're titles. So the next slide, with that in mind, this is important. I'm not going to go into the details here, but the key message here is that our outage causes these are the customer minutes. So customer minutes is calculated based on the number of customers impacted times the duration of the outage. And so that's why the minutes are so high. But you can see it's a downward trending line since 2017. And that's the key message of the slide. And you can see we were tracking all the different types of outages by cause. There is spikes here and there. But the key message is the 2023 targets are a lot lower than the 2022, which is a great segue into the next slide, because when you look at the pie chart doesn't give you the sense that we're on a downward trend. And so what I've done this year is I've included the customer minutes for each of those pies, so you can compare the 2022 to the 2023. And even though 2023 goes to the end of September, you can already see that, there is a significant difference in the number of customer minutes from one year to the next, even though some of the pies are bigger. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. It's another P coming at you. I just want to clarify that customer minutes are, so the number of accounts times the number of minutes that the system is out?
No, it would be more like meters, number of meters.
Number of meters, sorry.
Yeah, so it'd be the number of customers. Well,
so if you have 10 meters in a neighborhood and the power goes out for 10 minutes, is that 100 customer minutes?
Yeah, exactly. So it'd be 10 meters, 100 customers, and those times together.
I can't remember if I saw that or just made sense. Thank you.
Yeah, so the key message here is that even though the tree contacts pie for 2023 is larger, the number of customer minutes is almost, by half.
Oh.
So
Smaller pie.
That would do it too, wouldn't it?
I'd like a stacked
Pie by the size of the number of
I
minutes,
just,
yeah.
I think people
That's
capture the
interesting.
stacked bar graphs.
Sounds like you got a volunteer for our, design next.
Yeah.
Oh, this is excellent, though.
Yeah,
Good detail.
yeah, this is really great.
And that's all I had to share. Any
great.
questions, other questions anything to add, Scott?
No, excellent job, thank you.
Yeah, good work.
It's been fantastic to have someone like Jillian on the team who likes to dig into all the little details like this and make sure that all of our data is being recorded accurately, and that we can now see the trends and we can now make good decisions based on the information that we're gathering.
I'm sure Councillor Tate is absolutely just
Yeah.
in that plane. Hopefully she's a first class, not coach, just thinking like, I'm missing out on all this data.
Love this.
So I'm going to be telling her for sure that at least to capture your presentation when she gets home. So
I know you try to make data fun, Yeah.
Councillor Payne, you have a question?
I guess the human element, I'm back on that slide.
Yeah.
So am I understanding that it's primarily within Nelson Hydro?
Correct.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I want to clarify, because I
Exactly.
didn't know
Human
if-
element is when one of the staff, there's been something we inadvertently did wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if there's some sort of activist event
Oh, okay.
that takes down, goes
That-
after one of the services or the cyber attacks, things like that, what?
That would be foreign interference. Exactly.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Foreign interference.
Yes.
I thought of that initially, and then when
Yeah.
you started talking about birds and things, I'm like, oh, I'm on the wrong track there. Okay.
Foreign interference. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sabotage. Whereas,
Oh,
the
oh,
human
there it is
element-
down there at the
yeah.
end. Okay, thank you. I didn't get that far. Thank you.
Safety.
I all of a sudden got onto the birds, animals, and
Fortunately, sabotage isn't a common outage cause in our system, so.
hallelujah.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. We're
Yeah.
so grateful to be where we are.
What about that unknown, though? Obviously,
Yeah.
it's unknown,
The unknown
that's a
is
big one.
unknown.
but it's quite a big chunk.
It is. And so
The human element is a bigger
we've
chunk this year.
tightened up, since our systems engineer has come on board, we've tightened up the causes. And so we are asking her if it's a bird or an animal, we want to see the carcass. We want to know that it was, that in fact.
Good.
And so.
for the kill shot.
And so, but if there's nothing obvious, it has to go as unknown, and then all those unknowns are investigated by our systems engineer, and he's looking at like harmonics or SCADA settings or other things that are less obvious behind the scenes. And so he's had some tremendous success this year and reconfiguring some of our reclosers and other unknowns we've had in the past.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes complete sense.
Unknowns
I
that were
love-
just called, must be a
Yeah,
bird.
totally. You're like, yeah, it's a bird down and
Where
moving
else?
on, right? But it's
Yeah.
actually
Squirrel.
something-
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Before Jillian runs,
Yeah.
I should also mention that Jillian has led the GIS initiative and has a GIS background and is also supporting the city review of this, and you'll see her next Tuesday, I guess. So yeah,
Perfect.
kudos for Jillian to get GIS up and running, or almost there on the
Yeah.
hydro side. So
At least shepherd it.
yeah.
Yeah, I can't take full credit, but yes, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, this is great.
Thank you.
Very
Fantastic,
exciting.
thanks, Jillian. So in the past, for the EcoSafe program, we have had Avi and or Carmen come and present. I'm just going to present a single slide today, just because when we were talking about the presentation last year, we went a little bit long and wanted to keep things focused. And I do know that the climate and energy team will be presenting to council, and I'm also aware that council is quite familiar with a lot of the good work that they're doing. And I can't understate how important the work that they're doing is, because, as we mentioned before, the less power that people are using, or the bigger the shift we can make within our community, the better we're all going to be for it. And Nelson Hydro is very proud to have kind of initiated that EcoSave program, and in some ways, it's been pushed out of the nest, and it's now sort of grown bigger wings and is flying as part of the climate and energy team. So I asked Avi, who's the main person for the Regional Energy Efficiency Program that Nelson Hydro sponsors and supports with our budget funds, to just pull some numbers on the program from just a Nelson Hydro customer perspective, because they're tracking sort of the entire region. So you can see it is still a very popular program based on the numbers of people that are still inquiring about it. Even though it's been running for 12 years, we're still getting many new registrants within our area. I get the impression that relative to the rest of the region, it's starting to slow down a bit, because other regions are just starting to get it for the first time, or other areas in the region. But really happy with the work that this group does. They have been working very hard. It's something we've been talking about quite a bit in terms of the community efficiency financing. It's been in the works for some time, because one of the concerns that our rural customers have been had was, why can't we have access to some of the loan opportunities that the city residents have from Nelson Hydro. So I'm hoping that they're able to get that across the finish line and set something up that will service our rural customers as well with those on-bill financing programs that we have available. They've also been making really good progress with the contractor advocacy. We've had a real crunch with qualified people in the region that can actually do a lot of the retrofit work under the various programs and eligibility, and they've made some great strides in terms of getting that up to a provincial and national sort of level of awareness, and we're starting to see an easing up of that, and so it's one less barrier for people to be able to access that. And as I said, I'm expecting that they will be presenting to council at some point when they're presenting their budget, and they'll go through the full program of what they're offering. But just wanted to touch base on that. It is really important work, as I said, does tailor well with the work that we're doing, and as I can tell from the questions from council so far, lots of interest in the programs that are there, that they're gonna help some of our long-term goals and strategies.
Councillor Payne.
So when you have do an energy retrofit, so you have your initial energy assessment with your blower door test, and then you do those activities that are recommended, hopefully some of them, and you close that out by doing another energy assessment. Do we receive that data back?
Yes. And
where is that sitting? Is that something that, I don't know that I've seen anything like that on the socials yet. I'd love to know, I insulated my attic for $1,500, got a $500 grant, and saved so much per month. Mm-hmm. That to me would be an incentive to go, maybe I should look at this. And I know people are getting there in other ways, but I think we all know there's a bigger opportunity, and especially since we just put another $250,000 into that fund. Is that correct? For people to loan from?
Well, we increased it to $1 million because
we
were at
increased it to $1 million, so even more money. But I was just thinking about that. I did not. We did our EcoSave as soon as we moved into our home 6 years ago, and we did not do the final thing. So you don't have our statistics, but I do know approximately what we did. So I assume that information's out there, and it might be just a further incentive to help people understand. Whereas on the other hand, we got a hot water heat pump, and that's going to take a while to pay back, but still interesting.
Yeah, so the statistics, people have to do their final assessment, and they have to submit their grant receipts. And so as soon as they do that, that triggers the agreement that we have with the federal government to provide us with the information on their the retrofit. Unfortunately, if people don't go through that full process, or if they only apply for the provincial grants or only access the provincial grants, we don't get those statistics. But I do know they are collecting the statistics. I'll make a note and talk to Avi about social media posts. I know Nelson Hydro, we haven't, been, pulling information from the climate and energy team to post on our site, but perhaps that's something that maybe we could as
Well, you've
part
done
of
some
our
EcoSave
awareness
stuff,
cap.
right? I think I've seen EcoSave stuff on.
Yeah, I've seen generic things, but
Yeah.
in terms of data or results, we have not been posting that, but that's maybe something. I know they have statistics and could provide council with the full breakdown of all the information that they collect and all the qualifiers and things like that in more detail than I could provide.
Yeah, and do we have targets? I guess maybe that's climate as well. Do we
Yeah.
have targets on retrofitting?
Yeah, that'll come from
Okay,
that side. of it.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll provide a full
Yep.
presentation
Awesome.
on the details and on how they're doing that. And, I know they're looking to expand it, and that's part of this CEF grant, would be an expansion of what they can provide. It would also really open up the financing options for people. There is a $40,000 grant for people who qualify for greener homes.
Yeah.
That's interest-free, which is definitely the first choice, but there's a lot of people who fall below the bar and aren't able to access those. So being able to access it through the EcoSave grant that we currently have through the city, and then also if we can get one for people outside of the city through the credit unions, will allow more low-income people and people who otherwise don't qualify, like renters and landlords and things like that.
Awesome, thank you.
The one thing that I think we should always note is, these rate increases that, in many cases are beyond our control, how you do those, even those small things to, make those energy savings, whether it's a programmable thermostat or those other things, that we really need that strong message is that's the, that you do have control over how much energy you use in many cases, and it doesn't have to be a whole energy retrofit of your home. It can be just as simple as getting electronic or getting a programmable thermostat. And even if you have gas, if you're saving it on the gas side, then you're saving your energy costs. So we certainly encourage those small things, the weather stripping, all those small things that you can do.
Great. If there's no other questions on EcoSave, I have a few slides just
Hold
on.
on.
Oh, sorry.
I was just waiting, but
Something else?
Oh, sorry.
there was no call.
Counselor Page.
It's another P coming.
So you've got here the Regional Energy Efficiency Program. So is this for the whole REAP program or just the side that applies to Nelson Hydro? Okay.
This is, so I had.
But it's not EcoSave, it's
I had-
the broader.
Yeah, I had Avi collect the REAP data for the Nelson Hydro Service area. So it's the City of Nelson areas E and F. This is the statistics for the stat. The entire REAP program has more
Okay.
bigger graphs.
So I kind of parked bringing this up at different points until we got to this EcoSave area. Just having come from a meeting this morning with the province, one of the things I wanted to highlight, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, Scott, is that, with the Peace area and Columbia area providing 80% of the province's power and the drought conditions out there, part of why we're seeing such great drawdown on the Arrow Lake Reserve, it has a lot less to do with the international treaty and a lot more to do with BC Hydro protecting its hydro generation opportunities going into the dry spells in the winter. So there's this strong linkage between the demand side of what we're doing overall and how it's having impacts on our water resources. Where we're looking here at these REAP registrations, I find the number of registrations to be a helpful part of the story, but when it comes to the delivery of the climate change on the retrofit side, I think how much power is being saved potentially, like the potential power and potential realized power that has been saved, because I have said this before, and we'll continue to have these conversations with the climate change team when they come forward. The necessity of working on that retrofit side and reducing that demand exposure going into the future is becoming more readily apparent, and I think more severe than we're really prepared for. And so I think the time for this program to step up beyond what it's already been capable of doing and being resourced effectively, hopefully on the other side of these regulatory decisions, I think is going to become absolutely critical in a lot shorter of a time frame than I probably even think. So I would look for us to see that demand side power purchasing from Fortis and really start to think how we're collecting an appropriate rate that can then fuel a REAP program that is many times larger than it is today, because I think we do need to support our customers getting to the other side of these retrofits in a very meaningful way, and we need to keep a stronger eye on this, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's that is the application that we have in that FCM that will allow much larger loans, much larger grants, etc. So, I did send a note to Carmen just to ask for an update of where we're at, because that's been a long, arduous path to try to get that funding. Seems to be, a real challenge, but that is how we're trying to create that capacity at this time. So that one's pretty critical for us.
Thank you.
Yeah. I understand from Carmen that they are in the application stage now, which I guess is a big step forward from the pre-application stage that they've been at for the last 2 years.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can provide a bit more detail. So as Scott said, we're at the application. Sorry, I think it's on lock there.
There you go.
We're at the application stage, and the whole idea behind that and why it took so long with the pre-application phase was that they want to have it mostly proofed out. So we anticipate the turnaround should be pretty quick to get it. I think what's important about that CEF funding and what it'll allow us to do and the changes that you'll see, to me, these numbers are super impressive because there hasn't been a lot of money spent outside of Nelson borders on advertisement, things like that, because quite simply the money hasn't been there, right?
Yep.
Because we've our old grant had run out and we're waiting to find this new grant and really trying to work it out here. So we will see a marked bump in our marketing spend, and then hopefully we should see the numbers coming up from there. And I think one of the important things that Kevin was noting before about and Scott mentioned it too, about the funding that will become available. The $40,000 Green Homes funding is really what I like to call a sort of wealthier person's grant, because it is reimbursable after you've spent it. So you have to come up with that money up front, whereas the programs that we're looking at offering will allow you to get the loan up front and then be able to. So yes, it won't be interest free, it'll be low interest rates, but it allows you to get the money up front and start doing the work. So you don't have to scrounge up the 40 plus whatever else your project's really going to cost in cash before you get that money back.
Great.
That's great.
Love it. Thanks.
And I wouldn't mind just pointing out as well that, as effective as this program is from a Nelson Hydro, ratepayer perspective, if you remember the slide at the beginning, it represents only 1% of our total O&M budget. So, that's pretty good value for our investment right now.
Councillor Payne.
I guess the one thing I would be interested in, it takes us back to data, now that you have my mind going that way, is with our current housing stock, do we have any idea of the potential that this, would we be able to tie it to investing a certain amount of money and what the potential savings would be going forward based on the age of the homes? Is that anything we've ever looked at doing?
I think we did the heat map.
Right, yeah,
Exercises.
yeah.
We know what our stock is. We can assume, I think you could look at, and I'm not sure if they've done this, look at, those sample of those homes, what kind of energy savings were they able to achieve, and it's called
Yeah.
connect that onto, we have Yeah, we have mostly 1950s and older homes stock in Nelson.
Is it like 80%, you said, I think?
Yeah, that's a hard number.
I don't remember that number, and this was a question that was asked at the council meeting last year, and we did, when we were looking at our electrification survey, we were trying to figure out a way to collect that data, but unfortunately, we weren't able to really get anything that was meaningful
Yeah.
from you know, the various, you know, the energy retrofit sort of, you know,
Yeah, I think,
data and information is there, but you know, we'll continue to look at that and work with climate and energy to see if there's ways
yeah,
that we can start to
developments-
predict that sort of
yeah,
thing.
development services will have better
Yeah.
data on our housing stock and
Yeah.
the age of our housing stock.
And just to follow up to that, what's the opportunity for commercial entities? What, can they, I don't know, if, can they get services from EcoSave? Is that, how do they upgrade? Like, I was standing out in front of the Bank of Montreal, they have huge single pane windows. Is there any way for us to encourage that sort of thing?
Well, they
I'm
there
assuming
definitely
they have the
been-
money to make the upgrades.
Yeah, there definitely have been programs in the past through Fortis, you know, that, you know, probably the bigger bang for the buck is actually on the commercial side when they, you know, they've done, I know, lighting retrofits where they've
Yeah.
replaced all the, you know, the old fixtures for LEDs or whatever. So I know Fortis tends to deal
Okay, so that's
directly.
directly through Fortis, then we don't get our hands on that one so much.
I believe so. They,
Typically not, I don't
Yeah,
think that.
makes sense.
that
Yep, makes sense.
EcoSave is really, you
No.
know, there, I think they're just referring.
And I also am thinking smaller businesses as well, if they own their own business or their own building, but yeah, just,
Yeah, and I think smaller businesses are able to call and have that, I mean, you know, the real, you know, key to the EcoSave has been, over the years, has been that, you know, connection and being able to sort of like help people, guide people through the various complexities of applying for grant, people that don't normally have that capacity or abilities, whereas commercial enterprises tend to be a little bit more sophisticated in that way and don't need as much support.
thank you.
I think where you end up having the challenge, I'm gonna riff here. I think where you end up having the challenge is that that first agent problem, right? There are many businesses, especially small, and even frankly, people in the residential market are not the owners. And so the people paying the power bills are not the people in control of the improvement of the asset. And so it is simply not high on radar. So that will be one of our challenges to overcome, is to create models that are incentivizing to property owners,
Yeah.
not just
It's okay, he wants a
tenants.
heat pump. Keith would like a heat pump.
I'm literally not thinking, I'm thinking at least 3 examples in my head that have nothing to do with whether or not I have a heat pump. But it's a real serious barrier, especially with the high tenant population that we have in this town, on both sides.
But I'm just thinking of when we did the, commercial water metering, and we were able to identify a lot of large users who
Yeah.
didn't necessarily understand what
Yeah.
the problems were, and then, Rory Gallagher went in and helped them resolve some of those small issues. But we don't really have any facility built in right now to identify those big electricity users and give them the same type of assistance.
Well, it seems that we can identify some high electricity
We
users.
can do them, we can
And
identify
they've all
them.
wanted to go demand metering, which makes one question why they didn't want to have a conversation about, oh, is there a problem? So, yeah, it's the cost of doing business, I guess, yes, so.
Yep, just interested.
yeah, that's something.
Always looking for extra
That's
savings.
something that, Nelson Hydro and the climate team could look at. Who are the high energy users for, are there anomalies, this hotel versus that hotel is one, substantially different. We did that, as you said, on the water side, and certainly can pass those on to Fortis to say, here's the ones we're seeing that seem to be high users. You might want to knock on their doors and see why that is, because they have strong demand management programs. So, that's a good idea. So we could certainly take a role in that of identifying those highest users, passing them on and saying, finding out, just connecting the dots, I guess.
And it is the anomalies, that's what I'm talking about,
Yep.
just the outliers,
Yep.
who's not complying. And one of the other interesting studies I saw a few years ago was letting people know what your neighborhood what your neighbors were doing, if it was more or less. And that was, well, in a UK study I saw, it was an incentive for people to go, oh, well, why am, and maybe we wouldn't have the same compliance around that because it's a different cultural concept about how much I use is whatever I want because I can pay for it, or if there's a different community perspective around that, we need to conserve so that we have enough for everybody.
Yeah, I know that's been a very successful method, across utilities who have advanced metering infrastructure.
Yes.
Okay, so if there's no other questions on that.
Okay.
It's interesting, we talked about we're gonna have one page for, because they're coming, and it's still been one of the biggest chunks of time, so you can see that this interest, so it's in my mind that when I'm doing agenda prep, that I'm gonna have a little bit more time, I think, for the EcoSave program, when they come and make sure we get through. So we're at 3:30, and Scott, you're last to give us a final overview of activities and your thoughts. And I still think we're going to be out of here at 4 o'clock. So
That's my hope as well. Thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to add a quick slide to just touch on some of the things that were maybe outside of the other topics that were presented here, just to make council aware of some of the activities going on. Just a general highlight, I think you probably already heard it a few times, that the regulatory proceedings have been quite taxing on the team, and not just Nelson Hydro, but the greater city of Nelson staff who've been supporting the regulatory process through this year. So that's something that we're acknowledging and trying to sort of manage going forward. We're hoping that once we get all this, get across the finish line with these proceedings, that we will have a streamlined process that will go smoother. Maybe that's next year, but maybe it might be the year after. I know we have had some discussion, even as recently as last week, about doing a multi-year rate plan that would allow us to set rates for like 2 or 3 years in advance, with mechanisms to make adjustments for those uncontrollable costs that are difficult to predict, but it would give a whole lot more certainty to ratepayers and reduce the burden on staff to file every year as we have been. So looking forward to the future in terms of regulatory from that perspective. In the meantime, the team's done a fantastic job of just meeting those deadlines and getting the information to the BCUC so that they can make good decisions. So that's where we are. I know with council hashing out the strategic plan for the city in the spring, Nelson Hydro has a 5-year rolling plan. So once we received sort of the feedback from council's latest revision, we did spend some time in the summer to take a look at our strategic plan and make sure it's aligned with the city, so that we were informed going into this budgeting process by that strategic plan. So I just want to assure council that we've thought about everything that was talked about and envisioned during that process, and included it in the plans, and they've probably heard some of that today. So
Can I just ask where to find that plan?
Oh,
I Googled it and I didn't find anything.
Oh, I don't have it posted
Oh,
publicly.
that's okay.
It's been just an internal
No
document
problem.
for the Nelson Hydro staff to use as a guidance, but
Okay,
I could share it with council, absolutely.
Please.
Yeah.
I'm interested.
Last year, I presented that we were putting together a communications plan, and rolled out some of the initial results of that, the branding and some of the initiatives that we're going, or creating our own Facebook page and Instagram accounts. And just as a follow-up to that, I know I've received feedback from several of council and others, but I'm feeling like it's going very well. We've had some very good feedback from that. I got really good feedback from rural customers at the meeting last week, and continue to get good comments on the level of communication that we're getting out there to the community, both sort of the standard, okay, here's just information trying to help educate the public, but also, the outage notifications and things like that are seem to having a positive impact on people's impressions of Nelson Hydro. I know when we put this together, one of the things I'd asked was that, I said, in 5 years' time, I want, people, when they think about Nelson Hydro, that the first thing they think about is, what a great reliable utility this is, and not, oh, my power was out last week. So both the work that the team is doing to improve reliability, as well as to be able to communicate and sort of, make sure that everyone's aware of what we're doing, seems to be paying off, and looking forward to continuing that in 2024 and beyond. Our water rights agreement arbitration, I know it's probably hardly even in council's memory, but it's almost 2 years since council gave me the authorization to go ahead with the arbitration process. It is a slow process, but we are actively in it now. We have our first evidentiary submissions to BC Hydro in the middle of November. I think it's the 10th of November. We make our first submission of the evidence. There's been a number of people, including the CAO, who spent quite a bit of time pulling documents that are 50, 60, 70 years old to support our argument. So we think we've got a strong case, and we'll see where it goes. If we haven't come to a decision before the 3rd and 4th of June, we have hearing dates booked in the lawyers' calendars from both sides to hopefully finally settle that. So by this time next year, I hope to report the results of that proceeding. But just as a reminder, that arbitration is about the agreement that was originally signed in 1989, renewed in 2006, that BC Hydro has interpreted as our obligation to sell them power at our cost of incremental generation, which at current time is 0.7 cents a kilowatt hour. And because our load has increased to the point where we now have no more excess power, we then have to buy that power back at 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So the agreement is valid until 2035. So it's worthwhile pursuing, even though it is taking a long time and long process. There's benefits to us, and we're just anxious to finally get a settlement to this and resolve sort of the discrepancy between our interpretation and BC Hydro's interpretation of this particular agreement. I mentioned last year about TELUS joint use agreements. It's kind of more accurately a TELUS joint ownership agreement, because we jointly own the poles within our service region. It's different than BC Hydro or Fortis. So it's a challenge for TELUS to kind of get their heads around. Again, another very slow process involving TELUS's lawyers, and with TELUS's recent downsizing, it's been even more challenging. But the good news is that we're just waiting for the final signatures on it. And this year we have been invoicing at the new maintenance rates and the new pole cost rates, and they've been paying the bills based on this agreement that is not yet signed, but we're close. I know I said that last year, but we're even closer.
So we're in the budget.
They're paying. That's the
Yeah.
main thing.
So right now we're counting on that revenue from TELUS for future work. Fortis BC. I don't know if anybody remembered from the pie chart that Jillian put up there, but the red sliver of that pie chart. And I said sliver because 3 years ago, that was half the pie, was loss of supply. And right now, year to date in 2023, we're 7%. So Fortis has really stepped up, improved their reliability incredibly, and we've been working closely with them. We're now in a maintenance mode where we're meeting annually to review the stats, but just sort of keeping in touch throughout the year. So we don't have an active project going on, but we're still working closely with them to keep that. But huge improvement with reliability from loss of supply from Fortis. So happy with that. And then some other conversations earlier talked about, the other municipal utilities. I am in contact with them, on a regular basis, many times a week in some cases, on all the different topics, whether it be technical, rates, supply chain issues, Fortis, rate applications, things like that. So we're in regular contact. We do meet quarterly as a group virtually. And then once a year, we're trying to get together in person, but that's hard to schedule these days. But it is a really good organization to be part of, and we're continuing to benefit from having those relationships.
When's your next meeting with the rest of the utilities?
It's supposed to be 2 weeks ago, but it's an unyet fixed date in November right now.
Okay.
But yeah, and again, we'll meet in sometime January or so.
I'm just bringing up from before, I'm interested in developing some sort of resolution around the AMI pieces and going to the province, especially as they attempt to meet their different obligations going forward. There's that announcement from Premier EB to bring on a terrific amount of renewable power within the province, which AMI is going to be a big part of. And I think if we can craft resolutions going into UBCM and AKBLG next year, and we can get sponsorship from some of these other utilities to develop a program to bring the rest of whatever is not currently AMI'd into the AMI system, then I think we could see mutual benefit.
Yeah,
but we need to develop something that we can all agree to as a resolution.
Yeah, it's an ongoing topic with the group. Right now, New Westminster is moving forward with an AMI program, but the other municipal utilities have not made that commitment yet.
Yeah.
They're dealing with other priorities, kind of like we are. Yeah.
So it's a financial issue. That's why they're not.
It's a financial and capacity resource issue. Yeah.
And from what I recall, primarily it's municipal utilities that are the biggest chunk of what that unconverted stock is, right? So
That's right. Yeah. 90% of all electric customers in Canada have smart meters. So it's just the small utilities like the BC municipal utilities and a bunch in Ontario that haven't made that conversion yet. And because of economies of scale, it's a challenge. So we're looking for ways to improve that.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to jump into just summarizing some of the things that you've heard today, specifically on rates, because I need to get to the recommendations from council so I can move forward with confidence. Just a quick comparison. I know Nathan had put up the slide sort of, for the urban and the rural, the average customer. So you can see that highlighted in yellow there. That's sort of our average customer. What the rate increase of 5.2% for urban and 6.2% for rural would look like. So for a electric heat customer like myself, at say 2,500, that's double that. So $20 a month increase, and then for lower income or lower consumption customers, it's less than that. So I just wanted to sort of put that into perspective so people understand exactly sort of what the impact is of the current rate proposal. And then while we're talking about the BC MEU, we have some statistics for, this is all the BC electric customer or electric utilities. The gray line that has a little hook in it is BC Hydro. They have a stepped rate, that's why it looks like that. And I do have to apologize to my our rural customers that I presented to last week. We had an error in the calculation of that step. It wasn't in the right spot. So this is an updated slide for that, but you can see BC Hydro is clearly the lowest cost for electricity. At least this is 2023 statistics. This does not show our 2024 rate increase. But you can expect that all utilities are going to be increasing rates, at least based on what I've heard and discussed with them all. BC Hydro is the cheapest rates in the province for low income, but goes to almost the highest for not low income, but low consumers. And for higher consumers, they go almost to the top. Fortis is near to top line that runs steady across the highest rate bracket. And Nelson Hydro, rural and urban are shown in red there, so you can kind of get a sense for where we are. Lowest in the province is actually Grand Forks. And I know I talked to Grand Forks recently. Their electrical superintendent has been off for a bit, so they're having a look at their revenue requirements, because I think they're maybe looking at the statistics and going, maybe we shouldn't be the lowest in the province, but that's for them to decide, and we've extended our support to them if they need any help with setting rates.
Is BC Hydro not reevaluating their step up?
They are, yeah, and I know.
Do you know a time frame on
I
possible
don't
resolution to that?
exactly have a clear picture on where they're at right now with that. I do know that they're introducing voluntary time of use rates as well. So, you know, some of these graphs could get complicated going forward with that. And I know Fortis has a stepped rate for people that were grandfathered in that are sort of weaning out. I think it's phased out in another year or so. So we're not showing that at all. But yeah, this is the best information I have. And this is for residential customers.
Because voluntary time of use rate would really help, could really help us.
Yes, but
Yeah.
you need AMI.
I know. I want AMI. I know
Yeah.
you do too. I just.
Yeah. So that's where Nelson's sitting in terms of a comparison with the rest of the province. I know people don't often, they're just like, well, who cares what everybody else is doing? This is my rates, and I want to understand that. So I think we've tried to walk everyone through, what is in the 2024 budget that is making up the current rates. So I have a few recommendations here. I'm hoping that I can get support from council that the budget that we've presented here today is for operations and capital is fair, just, and reasonable. Allows us to achieve the objectives that we've set forward while trying to keep the impact on ratepayers as reasonable as possible. Also looking for a nod that we're going down the right path with this flow-through budget variance deferral accounts. So we're looking at probably one for both operations and capital, just to sort of see if there's something there. So that we're going to be packaging up for the BC Utilities Commission. So this is rural only in particular, but requires a little bit of financial hoop jumping in order to be able to put this in place. And then finally, the 2 rate increases. So 6.2% for the rural and 5.2% for urban. Looking for support for that. And if not, I'm happy to answer more questions on it. I'll let you think about that for a second. I have one more slide here to just emphasize that I'm really, really, thrilled with the team that I have. We're working well together. Everybody's, got the best interest of both our customers and the city in mind, and great to work with. You've heard from them today, and then the rest of those who aren't at the table that are out there fixing the power lines and keeping the generators running are all very dedicated individuals and working hard. So and that's the main gist of what I had to say today. Open to questions, discussion on my recommendations.
Sabine?
So you all operate out of the Public Works building down on, okay, thanks.
That's correct, yeah. So we have offices and bays where we store the equipment at Public Works, and then, of course, there's the power plant.
Yeah. So are there people right there, out there, obviously.
Yeah, everybody, meets in the morning and we put the work plan together. So, there isn't somebody at the power plant every day.
Okay,
Only
Thanks.
as required as the work plan for the day goes.
And we still haven't done a group tour, although I did the group tour, but I would love to go back and do a tour if we still have that on the possible agenda.
Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Mayor. I just must say, I've been here for a number of years, and it's been really wonderful to, I have to say, under your leadership, to watch Nelson Hydro become a really tight operation, and you seem to have gotten the people you need in the places that you need, and just with all the graphs and the data, it's just really showing it feels like you're really heading in the right direction. And
Okay.
so, great leadership. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, it's good to have a good team. It makes
course.
it easy to lead. Yeah.
Of course. But you know, you playing a pivotal role in that. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
So I just would like to ask staff for comments. So we have these recommendations in front of us. At this point, do we need a motion to accept the recommendations so that then the submission can be made to BCUC? And then at which point do we see the actual bylaws with the rate adjustment come back? What's the timeline and what's the pleasure here? Or do we just say kind of we agree or should
Well,
we
I
pass
think-
a motion?
Yeah, I think a resolution to direct staff to prepare the bylaws with those rate increases would be appropriate at this stage. I'm not sure, Scott, or Gabe, have we talked about when the bylaws would come forward?
Yeah, it was indicated to me, like Gabe can join me here, but I understand the 7th of November was first reading?
Consistent with past years, my recommendation to the general manager was that we would bring it for the November regular, where you do first 3 readings.
Okay.
Then typically we're able to get that interim rate approval from the BCUC. We usually request to have it by December 1st. Then we're able to bring the rural rate pages for adoption at the December regular, and then it allows us to implement the rate for January 1st, 2024.
Perfect.
Both, because we need approval, we need adoption of the rural rate pages to be able to put the interim rate in place for January 1st, 2024. So they'll both be brought together at the November regular and the December regular.
Okay.
That's what we discussed, and I think it makes sense to be consistent with the past couple of years, and that's how we've done it.
So then, council, at this point, if we could have
Move.
a recommendation, a resolution to ask staff to go forward with developing the bylaws based on the recommendations that are here cited on page 59 of the report.
Move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. All those in favor? Oh, and that carries unanimously. Wonderful job to Scott and your team again today. Look at that, 353. Thank you very much once again. A fulsome presentation of, I don't know, it's kind of exciting. It's like one of those jobs that, we get to do something that very few municipalities in the province gets to
We do indeed.
to do and get to learn all about hydro
Making power.
and power. And I just think it makes this whole concept of, if you have to go down this green highway, we understand on a much more personal level the complications and challenges that it faces, really. So, yeah, extra knowledge that we have as the City of Nelson Council. Thanks again, and everybody have a great weekend.
Yeah.
And if we could have a motion to adjourn, I take it we got the late items. I think we're good. Motion to adjourn, moved by Page, seconded by Woodward. All those in favor, and that carries. Everybody have a good weekend.
And, we opened a